Hello everyone and welcome back to Nagash, and in today's video we are going to continue on my Soulblight Gravelord Long In-Depth Army Series. So this is going to be part 6 and we are going to be talking about all the Soulblight units. So this is all the vampire units, and I am going to warn you this is going to be a long one, as I believe they have 17 units. There's so many named characters now for Soulblight Gravelords, especially the vampires. So just to let you know, when we go into each unit, as I usually cover quite a bit of lore going forward, the lore section of when I review unit is going to be a bit shortened down, really, just so we can try and get on with this video without it being incredibly long and to the point where I just simply wouldn't have the time to record it. So this is going to be the last video, really, of going over the units of the Soulblight Gravelords, apart from the one special character who is, of course, by far the best in any game whatsoever, and that is going to be Nagash, and absolutely no bias in that opinion whatsoever. And with that aside, guys, I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, smash the like button, the subscribe button, the bell notification if you haven't already, as that massively helps out the channel. It's absolutely free. You can also support Nagash by joining the Patreon or becoming a member here on the channel, but we can get to that at the end of this video. And of course, as always, if there's anything that you think you can add to the discussion here and you've got experience with Soulblight Gravelords, put that down below in the comments. And if you've got any questions on Soulblight Gravelords, and in particular in this video about the Soulblight vampire units, put that in the comments of this video as well, and I'll answer your questions best I can. But with that aside, let us start with the almighty Felbats. Winging their way through the darkness, Felbats are hideous aerial predators marked by the Soulblight curse. Even the merest taste of blood sends these beasts into a frenzy. From there, only complete destruction can halt their maddened rampages. Okay, so talking about the rules, they're going to cost you 75 points for a unit of 3, so pretty cheap in that regard. And then they count as other unit, they're basically not battle line or hero or behemoth, etc. Going on to their war scroll, the description is a unit of Felbats has any number of models, each armed with elongated fangs. And obviously, any number of models, that means for open play, narrative, etc. And then going on to its will stat, it has a 14-inch movement, a 6+ save, bravery 10, and 3 wounds. So obviously 3 wounds there, nice, but that 14-inch movement is absolutely huge, making it one of the fastest units in the army. Then going on to its weapons, we have one which is the melee weapon, and that is an elongated fangs. So a 1-inch range, 3 attacks, 4s and 4s, no rend, 1 damage. And then the abilities, we have single-minded ferocity. So this unit can retreat and still charge later in the same turn. And its keywords are Death, Soulblight Gravelords, Sunball, and Felbat. So really Sunball being the most important one there for abilities we've already covered. And what we can really establish with the Felbats is that they are not a combat-orientated unit. Whereas the old Felbat War Scroll could be argued that it was a bit of a flanking unit, but these guys 100% not about combat here, but they are very much a tactical unit in the sense of its movability, right? So that 14-inch movement is huge. The fact that it can retreat and still charge later in the same turn means it can get about wherever it needs to. Just something to bear in mind here that, yes, you can heal these guys up, but they're not very survivable in any shape or form. So they're not going to really be probably charging and retreating too much, because once they're charged or stuck in somewhere, they probably will die fairly quickly. Now, the other thing I will say as well is why I think this unit is good. It's a little bit like what people used Ether Wings for, or Aether Wings, however it's pronounced, those birds from the Stormcast. Apart from they are extremely cheap for what they were. These guys are a bit more expensive, but they are great for objective grabbing, things like that. They can also be good for screens for units that are really, really fast. Things like, I don't know, you've got a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, and you usually would use direwolves to scream, shall we say, but that 14-inch movement of that Zombie Dragon is just a bit too fast for those direwolves to keep up, and the fact that the direwolves can't fly. These guys, the bats, they can fly, they can keep up, so they can be used as a good screen there, and their base sizes are pretty nice too. So overall, this unit is good for its tactical purposes. I would maybe put 1 in a list, but I wouldn't go too mad. Maybe 2 units in a list if I really want to screen and I really want to have that movability. Especially if I've got a lot of slow moving units like, shall we say, skeletons, etc. So that's where I think the place for the Felbats are. Obviously, nowhere to be seen in combat. Use them as a tactical unit. And it goes without saying that these models are absolutely fantastic and one of my favourite models from the Soulblight Gravelords range. I don't actually own any personally, not of these new ones. If they were a bit cheaper, I would have bought them, in real terms of money, but they are fantastic models. It's just a little bit of a shame that, their price in real money terms is quite expensive, considering that they are just there to die quite quickly, which is a bit disappointing, but again, fantastic models. And actually has a place in the army too, which is huge to actually have a unit that has a purpose. Again, there's other units that can do it, like direwolves, etc., being screens and all that. But if you really want a unit that can fly around, Felbats are your ones, because bat swarms are no longer a thing in your Soulblight Gravelords armies, unfortunately. Then going from 0 to 60 here, we go from those Felbats to Blood Knights. Now, Blood Knights are one of the best units in the Soulblight Gravelords army, just flat out, and we're going to go into that and why they are. So firstly, though, a bit of their lore. So Blood Knights are vampires obsessed with battle, and their code of chivalry, honour, are warped indeed. Mounted atop hulking nightmares, they seek out war wherever it can be found, trampling straight over lesser foes to reach the worthiest challenges. So going into what they're like on the tabletop, though, a unit of Blood Knights is going to be a bit more expensive than the Felbats, funny enough, because they are 195 points for 5, but I still feel like that's good value for what you're going to get. And they count as an other unit, but they can count as battle line if taken in a Castellet army. And that's why you can see, if you want to go very heavy on your Blood Knights, go Castellet. I mentioned this when I reviewed Castellet in the Sub-Legions video, which you can check out if you'd like to, you haven't already. But they have a very nice home there. So going on to their war scroll, we start with the description. A unit of Blood Knights has any number of models, each armed with a Templar, Lance or Blade. So again, any number of models, open play narrative. Then the rest of the description, it says, mount this unit's nightmare attacks with their hooves and teeth. Champion one model in this unit can be a Castellant. Add 1 to the attack characteristics of a Castellan's Templars, Lance or Blade. And then going on to the Standard Bearer, we have 1 in every 5 models in this unit can be a Standard Bearer. You can re-roll 1s of the Deathless Minion battle trait for this unit while it has any Standard Bearer. So the standard sort of Standard Bearer, if you like, for the Death Soulblight Gravelords in the terms of being able to re-roll that one for Deathless Minions, which is amazing. It's really, really good. So going on to its will stats, you have a movement of 10, a 3+ save, bravery 10, and 3 wounds. So movement of 10, I mean, it doesn't sound that fast, but these are heavy armoured, cavalry at the end of the day. But the two lovely things there are the 3 wounds, which are always nice to see. Chaos Knights have 3 wounds, these guys should as well. But that 3+ save is amazing. Obviously, we've talked about before in Age of Sigmar, especially in 3rd edition, there are multiple ways to, stack to your save rolls. And I know you can only sort of count it as 1 unless the enemy has rend, etc. But what I'm trying to say is that these guys have a 3+ save, just flat out. So as soon as you do a Mystic Shield of them or an all-out defense, they go to a 2+ save. And then if you have a way for them to reroll save rolls of 1, you're already laughing at how good that can be. So very survivable in that sense. And then if you take them in things like Castellet, and then you go for, I can't remember what the artifact was called, but there was an artifact in Castellet, I believe, that allows you to use Deathless Minions, but on a 5+ for basically a battle round or until your next hero phase. For full details, check out, like I say, my Sub-Legions video. I'm just going on top of my head. But basically what you can do is you can make, for a turn, these guys have a 2+ save, just flat out normally, and then you give them the 5+ Deathless Minion save. But also, remember, they've got a Standard Bearer, so they're re-rolling 1. So they've got a 2+, then a 5+ re-rolling that 1, which is really, really quite tough and hard to deal with, especially with other things you can do in this army, like making the enemy -1 to their rend, to take away 1 of their extra rends. Everything like that. Make -6 to attacks. There's loads of debuffing, and then making this unit so survivable. This unit can be very hard to kill indeed. Okay, then going on to its melee weapons. So we have the Templar Lance or Blade, which is a 1-inch range, 3 attacks, 3 to hit, 3 to wound, -1 rend, 1 damage. And then the Hooves and Teeth, which is a 1-inch range, 3 attacks, 4s and 4s, no rend, 1 damage. So the fact that that's 3 attacks just from the horses alone is quite a good nod to their effectiveness there. And then the Templar Lance, like I said, the 3 attacks, 3s and 3s, -1, 1 damage. Seems okay, the free attacks and freeze and freeze, the best thing about it, but the damage will increase as we'll get on with it. So the first abilities they have, which is Riders of Ruin. So in your movement phase, if this unit is within 3 inches of an enemy unit, it can make a normal move. If it does so, it can pass across other models with a wound characteristic of 3 or less that do not have a mount in the same manner as a model that can fly. After this unit has made a normal move, roll a dice for each enemy unit that has any models passed across by any models in this unit. On a 2+, that enemy unit suffers D3 mortal wounds, which is just another way really for you to be able to do some mortal wounds to your enemy in this army. As we've already said, with things like the zombies being able to do mortal wounds easily, Graveguard being able to do mortal wounds easily, and there's many other things that can in this army that you're not really sure of ways to do mortal wounds. So this is just a nice other bonus you can have towards there, and it's obviously very good again for movability and not just damage output. Then going on to the next ability, which is Martial Fury. So add 1 to the damage characteristic of this unit's tempered lance or blade if the unit made a charge move in the same turn. So we've just gone from 1 damage to 2 damage. Very nice there. Then if you go and you take things like the command trait from the Castellet sub-allegiance, you can basically trigger to make one of their Castellet battle traits come into effect for a turn, which basically gives you +1 damage to this unit as an example. And now you go for having a 1 damage on your war scroll to on the charge you're doing 3 damage, which is absolutely huge, especially you can stack attacks, everything else. Then going on to the last ability, which is the Hunger. As of course, this is a vampire unit, it deserves to get hungry, and its ability means at the end of the combat phase, if any enemy models were slain by wounds inflicted by this unit attacks in that phase, you can heal up to D3 wounds allocated to this unit. So this unit has a great way to heal. This unit should be killing enemy models, especially, if they're 2 wound, 1 wound models. Again, if it's stuck in combat with a monster, then, don't be surprised if it doesn't kill it, but that means even if this unit is bogged down in combat and not necessarily on the charge, it should be able to heal those D3 wounds twice in a battle round. So that's pretty good going, to be honest with you. If this unit was bogged down in combat from turn 1, it has the potential to have 10 turns of healing, potentially. So it's a not bad ability there. And you'll see the Hunger copy and pasted on a lot of other Vampire War Scrolls as well. And going on to the keywords, we have Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, and Blood Knights. So, like I say, the Blood Knights is one of the best units in this book. For the full breakdown of that, like I've already mentioned quite a few times, check out my video for Castellet and the sub-allegiances, because I really went into it there. But essentially, you can really make Blood Knights, who are already quite good, you can turn them up to 11 in how effective they can be in their combat output. They're very survivable, like we said. You can easily make them have a 2-up save, and then going on to a 5-up, rerunning 1 death save, and then they're healing those D3 wounds. And there are other ways for them to heal, obviously, in the game and everything else, and for them to improve their saves. The enemy's going to chuck a lot of rend with them, and for them to improve their attacks. So a very, very good unit. You take him with Manfred, for example, they're hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s already, just flat out. That's really, really good, with all the other stuff buffed on them too. So massive fan of the Blood Knights. And it's a reason why you see them a lot in games. And in particular, if you want to do the best you can with Blood Knights, go the Castellet sub-allegiance. And as we've just looked at, very sophisticated vampires who very much care about martial prowess, etc., and their code of chivalry, let's look at what happens if a vampire goes deep down into his acceptance on the lust for blood. So this, of course, is going to be the Vargas. So the leather-winged horrors known as Vargas, so vampires who were overwhelmed by their bloody thirsts. Now reduced to savage and near uncontrollable beasts, they viciously attack any prey in sight in a flurry of tearing claws and sharp fangs. Now on the tabletop, they're going to cost you 155 points if you want to take them in a unit of 3. And they are going to be an other unit, or they are battle line if you take them in the Legion of Night. So then going on to their war scroll, they have the description. A unit of Vargas has any number of models, each armed with murderous fangs and talons. And then it says that the unit can fly, and there has a champion. So 1 model in this unit can be a Vargoyle. Add 1 to the attack characteristics of any Vargoyles, murderous fangs and talons. So its will stats are 12 inches movement, a 5+ save, bravery 10, and 4 wounds. Okay, so the nicest thing there is the 4 wounds followed by that 12-inch movement, because 12 inches is still very fast, and that 4 wounds is obviously very tough, but that 5 up armor save is not so tough. Now again, chuck a Mystic Shield on them, and all-out defense that goes to a 4 up, so it's a lot more manageable, but if the enemy starts chucking quite a bit of rend at you, these guys will suffer. Now what I will say is the same thing I said when I talked about the Blood Knights. If you go Castele, then these guys with a certain command trait, you can make them for that turn have an extra damage, but also the other thing I was going to mention is that you actually get a +1 to your wounds. So where the Blood Knights would go from 3 wounds to 4 wounds, these guys go from 4 to 5, and then that means that these are basically a unit of 3 small heroes with 5 wounds a pop, which is not bad for 155 points. Again, it requires a certain command trait, and it's only once per turn, unless you actually unlock it permanently, and that's Sub-Allegiance. But I just thought that's something definitely worth noting. Then going on to the melee weapons, we have the Murderous Fangs and Talons, which is a 1-inch range, 3 attacks, 3 to hit, 3 to wound, -1 rend, 2 damage. So obviously good that it's a flat 2 damage there. It'd be making these guys pretty pointless if it wasn't. Then going on to the abilities, we have a Blood-Maddened Feeding Frenzy. So if the unmodified hit roll for an attack made by this unit is a 6, that attack scores 2 hits on the target instead of 1. Make a wound and save roll for each hit. So this is really where these guys come into their own. So for example, even let's say you've got a unit of 3 of them. They have, 3 attacks each, plus the champion that has 4. So you're looking at 10 attacks basic. Put a Vampire Lord command ability onto these guys. So now they actually are going to have, 13 attacks. Have a Manfred nearby, +1 to hit and wound roll. So that's 13 attacks, hitting on 2s, wounded on 2s, -1 rend, 2 damage. Obviously, if you go Castele, more damage, everything else. But let's just say you've got that. Then every 6 you've got is 2 hits, and your damage 2. Just basic before you have other ways to plus to your damage. And that's pretty damn good, to be all honest with you. And I've used these guys as quite a... Let's say I haven't taken them yet in Soulblight Gravelords in units of 6 and everything, try and make them a real hammer unit, mainly because their bases are quite big and obviously the coherency rules. But take me units of 3. And for 155 points, you can kind of let them do their own thing. They can go and they can flank, or you can keep them more in the centre and have them supported with Manfred or whoever, etc. But these guys are very efficient and very effective of just really punching above their weight for what they do. They can tear apart, small, weak defended enemy units, especially units of 10 models with 1 wounded piece, or they can easily go up against more elite things while packing that punch. That has only got -1 rend, but that's still nothing to be too shunned at. Because I know there is all this talk about, all-out defense and Mystic Shield you can chuck here and there, but all-out defense, for example, was something you can only put on 1 unit in the combat phase, right? So it's not something you can always rely on. And then going on to their next ability, which is a Death's Descent. So instead of setting up this unit on the battlefield, you can place it to one side and say that it's set up circling high above as a reserve unit. If you do so, at the end of your movement phase, you can set up this unit on the battlefield more than 9 inches from any enemy units at the start of the 4th battle round. Any models that are still in reserve are slain. So obviously, being able to set up a unit in reserve is fantastic. Won't always be able to rely on putting it down because the enemy can screen against it, but just having a unit of 3 of these in the sky is something that you can just do to make your enemy have to try and screen against it and just really make them have more problems dealing with the potential deep strike of the unit of 3 Vargas, then really more than what the threat is worth, make the enemy overcompensate for it. To be honest, I usually deploy these guys in the ground to start with though, because I want to get the most use of them straight away. But bear in mind that if the enemy has got shooting, these guys could get shot off the board pretty easily with that 5 up save basic. And bear in mind, unlike, the Blood Knights, they haven't got a banner obviously, so they're not rerolling that 1 for their death save. And these guys, I'm a huge fan of them because basically I've got a huge Crit Flare army for my Flesh-Eater Court. And Crit Flares, Vargas, basically the same kit, so I just use them as the same model if I want to go Soulblight Gravelords, so I want to go Flesh-Eater Court. So I've got a lot of Vargas, and I have very much enjoyed running heavy Vargas lists. And again, I would say, pound for pound on paper, what's better? Vargas or Blood Knights? Blood Knights are better, just overall. But Vargas is something that you may already have in your collection, because obviously Blood Knights were quite hard to have until recently they started doing the plastic kits. And also Vargas is something, like I said, if you've got crit flares from your Flesh Eater Core army, you're starting off with Soulblight Gravelords, just use the same models. If your opponent's got a huge problem with it, then find a new opponent is the only suggestion I can make. And what I'd say is Vargas, unlike Blood Knights, they can fly, and they're much more of instead of an end-all hammer unit, Vargas are quite good as a skirmish unit to make your enemy have to think about this flanking unit that's on the side that's not really that scary, but it can probably take out most things the enemy would have on their back lines. But yeah, so very much a big fan of the Vargas, and who doesn't like blood-craved, maddened, monstrous beasts of a vampire? And you know what? They're not nearly monstrous enough, so why don't we take a look at the Vag Scribe, which of course is like the Vargolf type creature from Warhammer Quest Cursed City, which is also getting a re-release, so that's cool news. But let's go on to talk about this creature. So, unable to control the feral aspect of the curse that surges through their blood, Vag Scribes are towering, dissident creatures on the hunt. They stalk their prey before descended upon them in a frenzy of slashing claws and razor-sharp fangs. And then going on to what they do on the tabletop, because clearly they've been built up so they can kill everything, so let's hopefully see that that turns out to be true. They're going to cost you 115 points, and they're going to count as an other unit. So to be fair, pretty cheap, so my expectations aren't really too high, which is always nice to see. Like if this thing was 160 points, I would be expecting quite a bit. But 115, let's see what it does. So its description on its war scroll, a Vag Scribe is a single model armed with talons and a gaping maw. Going on to its will stats, it has an 8-inch movement, a 5+ save, a bravery 10 and 8 wounds. So not bad to be honest with you, pretty fast. Again, the save isn't great, it's like a Vargolf. But that 8 wound characteristic is very nice to see on a model so cheap. Going on to its weapons, we have melee weapons and we have 2. So the talons, which is a 2-inch range, 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1, 2 damage. And then the gaping maw, which is 1 attack, freeze and 2s, -2 rend, D3 damage. And I think that's pretty much exactly the same as a Vargolf. Maybe the Vargolf has 2 attacks with its gaping maw, but I'm not too sure. It's pretty goddamn similar. I know the rend and the damage is the same. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because of course this model is cheaper. Then going on to the abilities, we have Bounding Leaps, so you can attempt to charge with this model if it is within 8 inches of the enemy instead of 12. Roll 3d6 instead of 2d6 when making a charge roll for this model. So yep, that's always a fantastic ability to see there. Well, I'm used to having it on things like Morgasts Harbingers, and it really does make a huge difference in getting reliability and where you want to go. And if there is a way to deep strike somehow, that means that you've got a good chance of making your charge once you have deep strikes. Then going on to the next ability, which is Gnarled Hide. Roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to this model. On a 5+, that wound or mortal wound is negated. Now that is good. It means that obviously, your normal death save, the 6 up, now which is a 5 up, and you don't get the extra 6 on top, obviously, because it doesn't stack. But that 5 up save, fantastic. It means instead of ignoring a 1/6 of all damage, you're going to ignore a 1/3 of all damage. And what that means is that this thing basically has more wounds than it says in its wound characteristic on the average. Then going on to the keywords, we've got Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Vehicles Dynasty, and Vag Scribe. So remember, this is Vehicles Dynasty, so it's one of the first that we've came across like this. So that means that you can take it in things like Legion of Blood, Legion of Night, Castelline, and then Avangori, but you won't be able to benefit from those sub-allegiance abilities if they target, let's say you put this thing Legion of Blood and it says Legion of Blood units. This thing does not benefit from it, but this guy can go in there. So this guy is made to go into the Vehicles Dynasty, which to be fair is one of the good dynasties as well. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people use it for competitive play. And this creature, I think for 115 points, I would say it falls a little bit in between the gaps. And that's because it doesn't actually add anything to your army in terms of synergy or anything like that. This thing isn't a hero, so it doesn't give off a Deathless Save aura, anything like that. But what I will say is that for 115 points, you can have this thing, you can put it on the flank, a little bit like I was saying with the Vargas, and just make it a problem to your enemy. Like, it's not the biggest, scariest thing in your army, but the model looks fairly intimidating, to be fair, for what it does. And if your enemy just leaves it, unimposed, it could go around their back flanks and take out some, shooting or something like that. It's pretty fast, it's got good charging, it's got the good capabilities to deal some annoying damage to your opponent. So I would take this as kind of a distraction piece, and if the enemy doesn't deal with it, it's probably going to cause them a bit of pain. And for 115 points, I think you can definitely try this out and see how well that does. I don't think that this thing is too expensive to never see on the tabletop. Like, if this thing was like 160 points, but yeah, that's just not worth it. But obviously, there's so many working parts in Soulblight Gravelords Army that it's hard to put something in just for like, oh, just for the fun of it, let's put it in. And obviously, like I say, I play narrative and open play anyway, so I'm definitely playing to have a fantastic time. But if you're playing on that really competitive level, you might struggle to squeeze this guy in there. But if you've got experience with this guy, let me know that in the comments, as that'd be great to hear, as I haven't actually ran him before. Then to stay on to the Vargas train, we are going to have a look at the Vargas Bloodborne. So, in the gloom-shrouded streets of Ulfenkarn, the Vargas Bloodborne are never far away, stalking the shadows in search of prey. Once these vampiric fiends catch the scent of blood, they attack with a savage ferocity and lightning speed. So, on the tabletop, they are going to cost you 125 points for free, and they are an other unit. Going on to their war scroll, the description: a unit of Vargas Bloodborne has any number of models, each armed with a piercing blade. They have a will stats of 18-inch movement, 6+ save, bravery 10 and 3 wounds. So what I will say there is the 3 wounds, of course, is nice, but the whole 6+ save makes these guys incredibly fragile, easy to be killed by enemy shooting, etc. Going on to their melee weapons, we have the piercing blade, which is 1 attack, freeze and freeze, -1 rend D3 damage. So you can see they're a bit of a glass cannon, and quite a random one of that because of the D3 damage, but if you get these guys in there, they can tear apart a few things with that reliable hit into wound roll, but the damage is D3, so again it is swingy. Then going on to the abilities, we have Vampiric Agility. So when this unit makes a move, it can pass across terrain features in the same manner as a model that can fly. So that's always really useful, especially when you're trying to make those awkward charges into enemy units. And it means, essentially, there's like a big building, which is like a flat wall, so the enemy can't literally just go through it. They would have to climb over, and they don't fly, so it's really hard. You can safely position your guys behind the wall, protect them from enemy shooting, and then you can just simply charge over it, which is very easy, very nice for them. So going on to the next ability, we have Blood Scent. So add 1 to the wound rolls for attacks made by this unit that target a unit that has 1 or more wounds allocated. So that's pretty good, because bear in mind how many mortal wounds you can do in this army, and fair enough, you can do some mortal wounds from range, arcane bolt, etc. And then you send these guys in after to do that damage, because then you're hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s, put all out attacking these guys if you like to, or another way to give them +1 to hit. And now your 3 attacks, 2s and 2s, -1 D3 damage. Pretty nice. And then going on to the next ability, we've got Shadow Fast. So roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to this unit. On a 5+, that wound or mortal wound is negated. So you see this ability copy and pasted a lot. We just saw it on the Vag Scribe, but at least they gave it a different name. And that 5+ after save is incredibly good and really, really needed for these guys, because otherwise they've got a 6+ and they would have nothing else. So that 5+ really does help. I know they would have had that 6+ normally for a death save, but the 5+ massively helps them, because honestly, as soon as the enemy chucks like -1 rend at them, let's say they have Judicators, which I believe have -1 rend, fire at these guys don't have a save, unless they've got out defense or, a mystic shield on them, which I would highly recommend you do, because these guys are very, very, very fragile. But then going on to the keywords, we've got Death, Vampire, Soulblight, Vargas, and Vargas Bloodborne. So I think it's a unit it's quite hard to tell, because again, I haven't actually used it because I don't actually own the Curse City contents of that box. But what I would say is, if you do own that box, like the Vag Scribe, it's worth giving a go. I think the Vag Scribe is more useful just because it's more survivable compared to the Vargas Bloodborne, and then also the Vag Scribe is 10 points cheaper. So if you're going to be picking one out of the two for some reason, I would go with the Vag Scribe. But the Vargas, I think, could be useful. They could die so easily, but they could do quite a bit of damage. So, with these guys, you put out, I don't know, the Vampire Lord command bit and them, giving them extra attack, which we'll go through in a moment. So then that's, 4 attacks each? So then that's 12 attacks. Give them +1 to hit. Why not stack all the good things on them? +1 to hit, +1 to wound. All the bells and whistles are going off. Then that is 12 attacks, 2s and 2s, -1, D3 damage. That's pretty good if you can get them there to do that damage, and all these buffs go on them as well. So I think they are worth a go. I think it's kind of one of those things where you just sort of take them and you go, they're either going to be, oh, bloody hell, that's a lot better than I expected, or, oh my god, they died instantly. I say you could maybe take a unit of 3 of these as just a bit of a distraction. Like, yeah, the enemy could just wipe them out really easily, but the enemy has to still target them with attacks to do that. And if they don't, then these guys could bite them in the arse quite a bit like the Vag Scribe. But I think the Vag Scribe is just a bit more reliable. But that is my thought of the vehicles of Bloodborne. And again, like I say, don't play these guys quite yet because I don't own them. If you do, let me know that in the comments. That'd be always great to hear. Right, and then next up is going to be one of the best looking units for this army, and there's so many good units out there. Like, to be honest, I pretty much like every model in this army aesthetically. Wonder Why being one of my favourite armies, but of course we're going to be looking at the Crimson Court. Now, it's important to note that this does come in a pair with Prince Delval, however it is pronounced, and what that means is that, like the Underworld Warbands, there's usually a hero in there, and then there's the unit. And we're going to have a look at the unit first, simply because we haven't covered a hero for Soulblight yet, and then we're going to cover all the heroes in a row. So, firstly, the Crimson Court. So, led by the charismatic Prince Duval, the Crimson Court are a unique collection of vampires obsessed with the hunt. Having slaked their thirst the realms over, they now set their sights on the living mountain of Beastgrave and the warriors who battle within. Which kind of reminds you actually just how old Beastgrave is now. I kind of feel like, is that the most recent, Underworlds one? No, it's like 2 editions ago or something. But these are where they came from, and they are very, very cool. They've been out of stock for quite a while. They come back in stock every so often, but the reason why everyone likes these guys is because you buy this box, I think for what, £25 roughly for the Underworlds box, and what that means is that you get 4 Vampire Lords in a box for £25, which is pretty damn good. And to be honest, I like some of these vampires more than the Vampire Lords you get for the generic Vampire Lord with the bats in the hair, to be honest with you. But going on to the tabletop, so what can I say about the Crimson Court? Now, firstly, you have to buy them with Prince Duval, like I did say, and that means that this is all going to come to a total of 200 points, so bear in mind that 200 points includes this, and then the Hero War Scroll we'll look at in a moment. But what you get, so it's a unit of 3, that is obviously going to be coming with a unit of 1, being Prince Duval, and you have, for the description, you get the Crimson Court is a named unit that has 3 models. Gorath, the Enforcer, is armed with a soulbound mace. Velas von Fane is armed with paired blades. And Enas Curseborn is armed with honed bludgeons. So I think that was all pronounced pretty well. But going on to the will stats, we have a 6-inch movement, a 4+ save, a bravery of 10, and 1 wound, which to be honest I think is pretty much a joke. I mean, something worth mentioning is that Gorath the Enforcer does add 2 to his wound characteristics, but I think just a normal vampire having 1 wound, I mean, that's crazy. A dwarf has 2 wounds, so why does the vampire only have 1? I'm pretty sure the vampire is meant to be more survivable than a dwarf, but oh well, I might be wrong on my fantasy lore on that one. But going on to their weapons, they have the Soulbound Mace, so this is also obviously Gorath. So this is 2-inch range, 2 attacks, 3s, 2s, no rend, D3 damage. The Paired Blades by the Lady is a 1-inch range, 3 attacks, 4s and 3s, -1, 1 damage. And then the Honed Bludgeons, which is a 1-inch range, 2 attacks, 4s and 3s, no rend and 1 damage. So the attacks are alright, they're nothing special. Probably the best one is going to be the Soulbound Mace because it is 2 attacks, it's got a 2-inch range, it hits on 3s, wounding on 2s, which is nice, no rend, D3 damage. I mean, the no rend is a problem there, but the D3 damage is nice. But you're not really taking these guys for their combat efficiency, I would say. I mean, what I would have loved for them to have done with the Crimson Court is, fuck it, make it ridiculous, make it 300 points or something, because no one's really going to be taking the Underworld Warbands most of the time anyway. So make the Crimson Court really, really strong. It's like, awesome, you've actually got a unit of foot vampires that are really good. Fuck it, make them all have 2-inch range, because why not? Give them, I don't know, 3 attacks each, 2s and 2s, -1, D3 damage, or 2 damage. It would have just been a lot cooler to see. Obviously, you wouldn't have seen it probably taken as much on the table, but like I say, not a lot of people taking this anyway. Getting on to the abilities, we have the Hunger, which we've already read out before. So that is if this unit basically kills any enemy models at the end of the combat phase, they heal D3 wounds. And then going on to the next one, we have Vampiric Agility, which is when this unit makes a move, it can pass across terrain features in the same manner as a model that can fly, like the Vargas of Bloodborne. So that's also very good there for the reasons I mentioned for the Vargas. And then going on to the keywords, they have Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, and the Crimson Court. So before I give a complete summary, I will just quickly go on to the Prince himself, because it all comes as one package at the end of the day. So here's the description. Prince Duval is a named character that is a single model. He is armed with a possessed blade. So his will stats is a 6-inch movement, a 3+ save, Bravery 10, and 5 wounds. So that's very good to see there. I mean, that 3+ save is massively going to help keep him alive. And the 5 wounds is just kind of a bit standard for what we expect vampires, because somehow he's managed to gain 4 more wounds than a normal vampire, which I don't understand why the normal vampires are only 1 wound, but here we are. Going on to his melee weapons, we have the Possessed Blade, which is 1 inch range, 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, minus 1 rend, 2 damage. So I prefer the 2 damage over the D3 because it's just reliable. Going on to his abilities, we have the Hunger, which we've already gone through. Then going on to his magic, Prince of Val is a wizard. He can attempt to cast 1 spell in your hero phase and attempt to unbind 1 spell in the enemy hero phase. He knows the Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield, and Fiendish Lure spells. So we know what Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield is. So what is Fiendish Lure? It has a casting value of 5, and if successfully cast, pick 1 enemy unit within 6 inches of their caster, and that is visible to them. Add 1 to the hit rolls for attacks that target that enemy unit until the next hero phase. So basically what I'm getting here is that this was really good in 2nd edition because there wasn't many ways to plus to your hit rolls, but there was also ways to, get reroll 1s to hit. Well, it used to be all out attack, but now all out attack is +1 to hit, and you can only stack pluses to hit basically if the enemy is making you minuses to hit. His spell of +1 to hit is not nearly as useful as it once were, which then makes me basically come to the conclusion that, of course, unless you're playing them for fun and just want to have a good time and you think the model's really cool, the Crimson Core are not worth its points in my honest opinion. But if you think differently, you've got experience, let me know that again in the comments. And his keywords are Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Hero, Wizard, and Prince Duval. Now, let's look at another named character, shall we? So this is going to be Lady Anika. And a little bit of lore for her is, even amongst the Soulblight vampires, Lady Anika's thirst for blood is legendary. In battle, she attacks as a Sangrean blur, her enchanted sword reaping a red harvest as her foes fatally stumble and slip in the gore that inevitably pulls about their feet. So that's what she does in the lore, and let's actually see if she does that in the game, because obviously a lot of these things, like I know when I was reviewing the Beast of Chaos, they said that everything tore through the enemy as if it was the strongest thing in the entire game. So what I like to do is see if it is actually, because she is quite a cheap hero, so let's not get her hopes up, shall we? As she is only 110 points, and obviously she is unique, and she is a 1 model leader, hero, etc. So going on to her war sculpt, it says description, Lady Anika is a named character that is a single model and armed with the blade of Prococian. I don't know how it is pronounced and I can't find it online, so that's what we're going with. It then says, if this model is included in a Soulblight Gravelords army with the Vargas dynasty lineage keyword, this model is treated as a general in addition to the model that is chosen to be the army general. So this is fantastic, and we see it copy and pasted quite a bit in some of the heroes for the Soulblight Gravelords. For example, Manfred von Carstein, if he's in the Legion of Night, he is considered to be the general, same as Neferata in Legion of Blood, Prince of Hordre and Castellet, etc. Her will stats are a 6-inch move, a 4+ save, bravery of 10, and a 6 wounds. So nice thing there is it's 6 wounds, because, obviously like we've turned out, Warhammer Underworld Warband, those vampires 1 wound, she 6 wounds. So again, don't know how that makes sense. But going on to her weapon, so the blade off, whatever it's called, 1 inch range, 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1 rend, D3 damage. So I think we'll find out in a moment, but the same as just a normal vampire, so I don't know why it has a special name. Going on to the abilities, we have the supernatural speed. So roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to this model, on a 4+, that wound or mortal wound is negated. So that means that half of all the damage she's going to be dealt, she is going to save on the average, so that really will help to keep her surviving in the game. Going on to her last ability, she has Kiss of the Blade of Probationary. At the end of the phase, if any enemy models were slain by wounds inflicted by this model's attacks in that phase, you can heal all wounds allocated to this model. So that's really good. It reminds me of the old Bat Swarm rule of basically they suck someone's blood out, they manage to all heal up, and she's got 6 wounds, so she could potentially have taken 5 wounds, potentially more damage dealt to her than that, and then she's halved it with the supernatural speed ability. So yeah, very quite survivable she is in the right situation, as long as she doesn't get shot off the board. Then going on to keywords, we have Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Vargas Dynasty, Hero, Vampire Lord, and Lady Anika. So the problem I have with her, and it's going to be the same with the Rat Prince when we move on to him next, is they do alright for what they are, you know, like a very incredibly cheap hero. You know, again, we're talking 110 points. And she's very good at staying alive and everything else. It reminds me a little bit like the mask for Slaanesh and Healing Knight Slaanesh when that came out, not just because Lady Anika's holding the mask, but basically because, if I remember correctly, the Mask of Slaanesh was very efficient and staying alive and doing what it wants to do. However, doing what it wants to do isn't actually that amazing and doesn't necessarily actually help your army that much. Like Lady Anika here, like she's got average attacks for a hero, and she doesn't really die easily, but she doesn't really add anything else than that. You know, no command ability, no buff or anything like that. Yes, she gives that death save, and yes, she'll be able to use those generic command abilities, and she'll be that, you know, model on the board to be able to get them out. But a lot of units can give command abilities out to themselves anyway. She's, you know, unique, so she can't take an artifact, command trait, etc. And I just feel like she's a bit, you know, why'd you take her when you can just spend a little bit more points to get a normal Vampire Lord who can take a command trait, artifact, and also can take a spell from the spell log. That is something else to definitely mention about her war scroll. Missing saying that she's a wizard. She's not a wizard, she can't do spells. So we don't see what she adds to the army. However, as I say for everything, if you think the model's cool, play it. At the end of the day, like I say, I play for fun. I'm not really worrying about what's the most competitive thing I can take on my list. If I think it's cool, I'll take it. However, Lady Anika, I think, is one of the worst models for the Soulblight Gravelords, if not my least favourite model, just because I just really am not a fan of the like big oval base and the really long dress. I just feel like it makes the model on the base disproportionate, and then just the big hair and like and the mask thing's okay, but you can replace it with the bat wing, which like I don't really know what it does. I saw someone online say, become a mighty vampire, and then you get, you know, blessed by abilities from being a creature of the night. It's like, oh, what do I get? And it's like, you get a wing. Or does that mean I can start flying? It's like, no, it's really like a small wing. It's like, can I use it as a weapon? No, it's not really a weapon kind of type of wing. It basically is just like a fan, but, you know, you're a vampire and you're cold-blooded at that point because you're dead. So I don't really know what the wing does, etc. Enough moaning about this model. It's not for me, but if you like it, absolutely fair enough. Going on to the next model, though, which is a model that I do prefer, actually, and I think actually had quite a really interesting story. I remember reading about it when it came out in a Warhammer community article, and that is going to be Kritzer, the Rat Prince. So, a bit of lore about him. Though Kritzer professes nobility in reality, his soul is as odious as the Ulfenkarn sewers that are his lair. Swathed in choking perfume, the Rat Prince is nevertheless a cunning adversary, returning after each apparent defeat to exact a cruel revenge. So a little bit more about his lore there. It's basically he got in a fight with Radhika the Wolf. Radhika the Wolf attacked him. Didn't really realise that he gave Kritzer the blood kiss when he did so. He was then subsequently chucked into a corpse cart, and as Kritzer started to turn into a vampire, he fed on all the rats upon the corpse cart, and that is why he's got a very much a rat appearance, and to the point where he is called the Rat Prince. So I thought that was a very cool, interesting part of lore there, and it could give you inspiration to make your vampires more likened to, I don't know, trolls, for example, because they've been drinking the blood of a troll or a dragon or whatever you want. You can sort of specialise your vampires that way if you want to get into kit bashing and all that sort of stuff. So very, very cool, especially for your lore. And then going on to him in the game though. So firstly, what I say, 95 points. So anything is a win at this point. And he is obviously unique and a single model as well. Going on to his description, and just say obviously he's a leader, so he's a hero. His description, Kritzer is a named character that is a single model. He is armed with the Gnaw Blade. So going on, he says, if this model is included in a Soulblight Gravelords army with the vehicle synergy, lineage, keyword, this model is treated as a general, in addition to the model that is chosen to be the army general. So again, fantastic for the same reasons as I said for Anika. Going on to his will stats, he's got a 6-inch movement, a 4+ save, a bravery 10 and 6 wounds. So again, all round pretty good, especially for 95 points. Going on to his weapon, the Gnaw Blade. So 1-inch range, 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1 rend and D3 damage. So he found it in exactly the same place as Anika, so that's funny. And the normal Vampire Lord, I think. Going on to his abilities, he has the Scurrying Retreat. So if this model has been slain, at the end of your movement phase, roll a dice. On a 4+, a new model identical to this one that was slain is added to your army. Set up this model anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units. So a deep striking vampire, if he dies, it reminds me of, is his name Scar Bloodwrath, whatever his name is, from Blades of Khorne. There's a similar sort of thing going on, and I think it's pretty cool. You know, he returns, it could pop on a back objective the enemy has forgotten about, but a 4-up, you know, you can't rely on it at the end of the day. And then going on to his next ability, which is, don't know how to pronounce either of those words, which is Neuracetin Aroma, I think that's what it is. Subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons that target this model. So again, subtracting 1 to hit rolls is very good at keeping yourself alive. I choose it as an artifact command trait quite a few times for my armies. But the problem is, he's got the same thing going on for him as Anika did, which is, he's good, he's survivable, he's coming back, you know, you never know where he's going to be. Everything else, you know, he's doing his thing. He's got 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1, D3 damage. But he doesn't really add anything to the army again. And he's not really good enough on his own. So I don't really know what he's going to do. All I can say, him over Anika is that, number 1, I personally think is a much better model. Number 2, he's cheaper. And number 3, refer to number 1 and number 2. Because they're the only sort of reasons I can suggest you would take this guy. And then his keywords are Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Vehicle Dynasty, Hero, Vampire Lord, and Kritzer. And again, you know, he's not a wizard, so he can't do any spells. But he's cheaper than Anika, and he's under 100 points for just chucking him in for a laugh. So that would be my reasoning to put him into a list if you would so like to. But if you are playing competitively to the best of your abilities, I can't see why you put this guy in it. Maybe for his deep striking potential, but you know, that's not reliable enough. And if you think otherwise, obviously, again, let me know that in the comments down below. And then the next one we're going to look at is going to be the Vampire Lord, and that's because I have been mentioning it quite a lot when I've been talking about Anika and Kritzer. So I think it's important to mention why the Vampire Lord is useful and better than them. So, its description. A Vampire Lord are elder undead whose dark powers have only deepened over the long centuries. Each is a warrior to be feared, while their command of necromancy sees them raise up fresh reanimated warriors with but a pulse of will. And again, if you want more lore, anything in this video, just stuff to do with vampires, do check out my vampire lore video I did, which is obviously the Soulblight Gravelords lore video, for all of that. But going on to this guy on the tabletop, so how many points is this guy going to cost us? Because although I said he is better than the last 2 we looked at, he is also considerably more expensive, but you would expect that for what he can do. So he's going to cost you 140 points. And he is a leader, and he is not unique, so very important there, which means that you're not going to be able to restrict it to not being able to take command abilities and artifacts. You can put artifacts command abilities on this person. So going on to his war scroll, you have the description, which is a Vampire Lord is a single model armed with soul-bound blades, and it can fly. And if you're wondering if you're getting back into sort of Legion of the Gash, i.e. Soulblight Gravelords now, you go, what about my Vampire Lord who's mounted on a horse? Like, yeah, I have one of those, or several, and they don't really do anything anymore because they got rid of it on its war scroll because it doesn't fit the new model they brought out. You know, sorry, make up some rules for it. Anyway, going on to its will stat, you've got a 6-inch movement, a 3+ save, bravery of 10, and 5 wounds. So what I will say there is a 3+ save is a very nice welcome addition, as he used to have a 4+ save. Because he only has 5 wounds, so he's got a wound less than the last 2 we looked at. But that 3+ save is honestly better and makes up for it. Because if you want to do like all-out defense of this guy, 2-up save, which is fantastic. And what I will say as well, when we're talking about this guy can fly, just bear in mind that the only thing that indicates that this Vampire Lord can fly is in its hair it's got bats. So I presume it, you know, transforms into, you know, a dark orb or into a flock of bats itself and then flies around, and that's exactly what any excuse I'd give for any of my Vampire Lords. Like, for example, one of them is the old Vlad von Carstein model, and I'll just go, yeah, he can fly, because, you know, he's got a cape and all this sort of stuff. So basically what I'm trying to say to you guys, if you're trying to come up with creative ways to make your guys fly and go, I don't really have a spare wing set, I don't really know how I'm going to fit the wings on, you don't have to. But if you want to, obviously, do it. But basically, come up with lore that makes you guys fly. And always go back to the answer of being magic. But going back to the war scrolls and not rambling, let's go on with the melee weapons. So we have the Soulbound Blades. So this is a 1-inch range, 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1 rend, D3 damage, which again is the same blades we saw for Kritzer and Anika, which is a huge surprise as I predicted. Going on to the abilities, we have the Hunger, which I've already read before, heal him if you kill something, and then his Magic. So there we go, magic, which I said is very important here. And basically, there's not really much to it, because he, or I really should say he or she, knows Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield, whoop-de-doo, but obviously he can take a spell from the lore of the vampires, and he can only cast one spell anyway, so yeah, it's alright, he doesn't have one in his war scroll. It would have been nice if he did, but yeah, it works out alright, to be honest with you. So you have that, and then the command ability, which is very good, because a lot of heroes, especially going into 3rd edition, they just don't have command abilities anymore in the war scroll. So Soulblight Gravelords are very lucky just to nip in there before 3rd edition hit. And what you've got is Crimson Feast. So this is, you can use this command ability in the combat phase. If you do so, pick one friendly Soulblight Gravelords unit wholly within 12 inches of this model, and one to the attack characteristics of that unit's melee weapons until your next hero phase. The same unit cannot benefit from this command ability more than once per phase, and this is a fantastic command ability. And I've mentioned it several times when I've spoken about any unit really in the game, haven't I, when I've been talking about Soulblight Gravelords? I think I was mentioning it a lot when I was saying put it on zombies or skeletons or Graveguard, etc. Put it on Blood Knights, as I've already mentioned as well, Vargas, just to really incredibly improve their combat efficiency, especially if you put it on Blood Knights on the charge, where they've got that other ability, like I mentioned, to give them that extra damage on the charge, and then their +2 damage on the charge, extra attacks, mental, the sort of stuff you can do with this command ability. So yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Just the one thing to bear in mind though is that you use it in the combat phase, so things like the enemy using Roar and stuff with their monsters to stop you being able to issue this command ability, or the unit can't receive the command ability because they've been roared upon, etc. So just bear that in mind with this command ability if you're trying to plan out your order of attacks, etc. But this is a fantastic ability, and it works on anything in the Soulblight Gravelords range, which is great. It used to be, I think, once upon a time, just like a def unit, which was absolutely fantastic, but times have changed considerably. But yes, so Crimson Feast is one of the reasons why I basically just take this guy on the list. It's the main reason why I take this guy on the list completely, because it is good. Like the other things he is, but to be honest, he's a wizard that can cast from the Lord Vampires, which the spells are alright, but not amazing. It's not as good as the Lord of the Death Mages, and everything else about him is okay. So the thing that makes him stand out is this command ability, and that is why you take him and put him into your list. And for 140 points, depending on your list, of course, but in most cases, for Soulblight Gravelords, he is worth the inclusion for sure. It's like where you include a Necromancer, generally always worth it. Going on to keywords, we have Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Hero, Wizard, and Vampire Lord. And then the next one goes out to a special guy called Radhika The Wolf. So, Radhika is a cruel and savage vampire lord who rules over the city of Ulfenkarn. In battle, he wields the barrow blade of a legendary vampire emperor, which when combined with his bestial nature, makes Radhika a fearsome foe indeed. And then going to the tabletop, he's going to cost you 150 points, and he is unique, he's a leader, he is a one model unit. So 150 points, obviously not loads of points, but more expensive than a normal Vampire Lord, so we are definitely having to see quite a bit of justification to taking this into your list if you want to go play competitively. Going on to his description, Radhika the Wolf is a named character that is a single model. He is armed with a Virkos barrow blade. So going on to his will stats, he's got a 5-inch move, a 4+ save, bravery 10 and 7 wounds. So the 7 wounds there is nice, but everything else is pretty basic, if not quite slow. Then going on to his melee weapons, we have the Virkos barrow blade, which is a 1-inch range, 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1 D3 damage. Now a lot of you guys probably don't really care about this, but this really does quite annoy me because I've repeated that attack characteristic countless times so far in the last, like 3 war scrolls or something? And this is meant to be the blade from an ancient vampire emperor and all that sort of thing. But it turns out all the blades, if you're a vampire, are made in exactly the same place. Unless, I don't know, you happen to be one of the Underworld's vampires where your attacks are not nearly as good. And maybe you can aspire to doing 4 attacks with D3 damage. Going on to his abilities though, he has the Hunger. So, this is the same as what we've seen for the other Hunger abilities, which is if he kills something, basically heals D3 wounds at the end of that phase. And then going on to the supernatural strength. So if the unmodified wound roll for an attack made with a melee weapon by this model was a 6, that attacks inflicts 1 mortal wound on the target in addition to normal damage. So that's nice. Obviously can't rely on it. It's a shame it's not to hit rolls, but it's still worth having, and it's still an extra sprinkle of the mortal wounds you can do in this army. Going on to the next ability is Loyalty to the Last. So roll a dice before you allocate a wound or mortal wound to this model while it's within 3 inches of any friendly Kozigai Night Guard units. So on a 2+, that wound or mortal wound is allocated to one of those units instead of this model. So that's good, but obviously you need to take those Kozigai units, which are okay, but not the best. When we review those in the Dead Walker videos, if you want to go check that out. But if you want it to be very thematic, it's cool. On a 2-up, they're taking damage from him, and obviously they're quite tough being undead ogres themselves. Then going on to the next ability, we have got Call to the Hunt. So you can use this command ability at the start of the combat phase. If you do so, pick one friendly model with this command ability that made a charge move in that turn, and add 1 to the attack characteristics of many weapons used by friendly Soulblight Gravelord units wholly within 18 inches of that model until the end of that phase. The same unit cannot benefit from this command ability more than once per phase, so this is actually very good. The only, clause in it though is that obviously you need to make that charge roll, and this guy moves 5 inches, so make of that what you will. He's probably not the most likely guy to get the charge in, but if he does, and there's a better option for all this in a moment, we'll look at Radhika The Beast because he's faster, so more chance of getting this off. But that is a very nice ability, especially how it is like an aura ability, which means things like Roar, unless Radhika himself gets roared on, it won't affect other units benefiting from this ability. As far as I'm aware, that's how the rules work. And then put the command ability from the Vampire Lord that we just talked about on them as well, and then that's an extra 2 attacks on a certain unit. So very good indeed. I do like this if you can pull it off. He is also a wizard as well, so he can cast 1 spell and unbind 1 spell in the enemy hero phase. Now what I will say is that, yeah, it's cool that he's wizard, but only being able to cast 1 spell, you think, big name character would be nice if it was 2, but he is only 150 points at the end of the day, but there are other wizards out there that are much cheaper than him and can cast 2 spells. So a little bit funny. And what I would say about this guy is he is there as a buff piece. His combat abilities are basically the same as any Vampire Lord, maybe getting a few mortal wounds in addition, essentially, on those wound rolls. Where I'd say his strength is his command ability is very useful, but obviously it's dependent this guy will get the charge, which you can't really guarantee, especially with a 5-inch movement. So although he is cheaper than the next one we're going to look at, I think it's worth paying the extra points to get the Beast Edition. But just to go on to say his keywords, he's got Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Vargas Dynasty, Hero, Wizard, Vampire Lord, Radhika The Wolf. And then going on to, like we say, his Beast Edition. And just a tad of lore first. So overwhelmed by his wrath, Radhika has undergone a terrifying transformation. The bestial monster within has come out to consume the vampires almost entirely, and he now fights with a raw and brutal fury, his ferocious howls ringing through the night. And then going on to him on the tabletop, he's going to cost you 315 points. So where I was saying the Beast is better and everything else, yeah, well the Beast is more than double his points, so there has to be a lot of justification behind this. And he's exactly the same in terms of unit role as this. He is a leader, he is unique, and he is a 1 model unit. Going on to his description as War Scroll, Radhika the Beast is a named character. That is a single model. He is armed with a blood-slicked claws, and if this model is included in a Soulblight Gravelords Army with the Vargas Dynasty lineage, keyword, this model is treated as the general in addition to the model that is chosen to be the army general. So we can see there is a shit ton of Vargas vampires to be put into a Vargas sub-allegiance, as we can see here, but it's nice to see that Radhika counts as being the general, very important. And then companion, so Radhika the Beast is accompanied by 2 Vargas Bloodborne that attack with their piercing blades. For all purposes, they are treated in the same manner as a mount. So that'll be things if there's like a command trait artifact, obviously only benefits the bearer, it won't affect the mount, i.e. the companions, as an example there. Then going on to his will stats, he has an 8-inch movement, so 3 inches faster, very good. He has a 4+ save, bravery 10, and 12 wounds. So to put that in perspective, his movement is obviously, 3 inches more. His save is a 4+, which I would have preferred it being a 3+, to be honest with you, because this guy is very expensive in terms of points. and he has got 5 more wounds than the wolf version, to be fair. So he's a lot more chunkier, because 12 wounds for a hero of this sort of size is very good. Then going on to his weapons, we have 2 melee weapons. We have the Bloodslit Claw, so this is a 2-inch range, 6 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1, 2 damage. Thank God it's not the same as a vampire sword. Then his Piercing Blade, which is 1-inch range, 6 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1, D3 damage. Vampire sword plus 2 attacks. So the attacks are good, but I wouldn't say overly good, for the 315 points. This guy is not there purely for his combat prowess. So going on to his abilities, let's see. We've got Bound in Charge. This model can run and still charge later in the same turn, which is fantastic, because that command ability we talked about for the wolf is the same for Radhika The Beast. So really, really good there. The Hunger for healing, which we've already been through. Supernatural Reflexes, so subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target this model. Very good to see there. As I've already mentioned, subtracting 1 from hit rolls is very useful. Where we talked about it before, it was useful, but for Radhika The Beast, we want to keep him alive, so very much more useful for him. Then going on to the Unleashed Ferocity, so if the unmodified hit roll for an attack made with this model's Bloodslit Claws is a 6, that attack inflicts 2 mortal wounds on the target and the attack sequence ends. Do not make a wound or save roll. So to be completely honest with you, that is very good. Whereas before it was like, there's a chance you might get like 1/6 to wound if you're lucky, and then that's a mortal wound to the enemy. This is much more reliable to come through because you get 6 attacks as well. So that makes him pretty damn good. But the only thing I would say is, as well as 2 mortal wounds is lovely, it is not an addition, which kind of sucks. And I don't know why they did that, because I think that if they want to make him, a beast, literally is in his title, give him that goddamn ability. Make it so it's an addition and make his combat prowess even better. And going on to his command abilities, we have Call to the Hunt, which we've just read through for the wolf, so I won't read through that again, but it's, if he charges, he makes an aura where everyone else gets +1 attack. So that's much more important for the beast, though, because he's got that 8-inch movement. He can run and charge, so you can make this guy just run a flat 6. So that means that this guy has got a base of 14 inches, his movement, and then he's charging. So he's got a potential threat range of, 26 inches? Again, very unlikely he would get that, but it just shows actually how much more reliable this guy is to get into charging than the wolf counterpart. The only thing I would say is obviously this guy doesn't fly, so just bear that in mind, that he won't be able to maneuver quite as easily around the board as, a creature that can fly, obviously. And then the next command ability we do have, though, which is different, is Mustering Howl. So you can use this command ability once per battle at the end of the movement phase. If you do so, you can set up a 1 unit of 10 direwolves to your army. The unit must be set up wholly within 12 inches of this model and more than 9 inches from all enemy units. So 10 direwolves. Firstly, direwolves are fantastic. Love them. Also, the models are amazing. And the other nice thing is, I know that direwolves come in units of 10 minimum now anyway, but it's nice that you do get to set up 10 of these, because that is at the end of the day 20 wounds worth of models. I get it's only once per game, but very useful there. Direwolves are very fast. They can do lots of good things in the game. So I've completely reviewed direwolves back in the video I did for the Deadwalkers, which you can check out if you'd like to. But that is a very nice command ability he has got in addition. Like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of battle tomes going forward simply just don't have command abilities for heroes. And the fact that this guy's got 2 and 1 more than the wolf, where if it was the same as the wolf, it would be like, I don't really know where you're getting all the extra value. But with this, it's just an extra nice bonus, because 10 direwolves, you can quite simply just subtract that, from the price of how much Radhika is costing you, I suppose, is an easy way to do it, because 10 is 135. So if you want to subtract that from Radhika's price, I believe that would make him 180 points, which then if you look at, is he 30 points worth more than the wolf? Absolutely. So you can really start seeing where his value comes in here. Going on to his keywords, he's got Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Vargas Dynasty, Hero, Vampire Lord, Radhika The Beast. So what do I think of Radhika The Beast? I know Vargas is quite a popular dynasty, and I say it's quite a popular dynasty. I mean, most of the dynasties and legions are popular within Soulblight Gravelords. That's one of the best things about the army. There's lots of good ways to run them, lots of fun ways. And Radhika The Beast is quite popularly taken in Vargas Dynasty. I personally don't own him, I'll be honest. Like I've already mentioned, I don't really own many of the new models for the Soulblight Gravelords. There's such a big collection from Legions of Nagash and Vampire counts. But Radhika The Beast is something that I would include, probably just because his combat abilities are pretty good. He's summoning direwolves, which I would probably put in the army anyway, so I can take them out of the cost of putting them into my list originally. And that command ability is absolutely fantastic. You know, you pair that with like Manfred, so everything's getting an extra attack, and then also with Manfred's one, so everything's +1 to hit and wound. You can really start triggering this off. Like I said, put another Vampire Lord in there. Something's getting 2 extra attacks. There's loads of synergy you can do with him. And I think that's something that I really like about this army, which I've already mentioned, is that just how much synergy there are with these heroes. And as you can see now that we're reviewing a lot of these heroes in this Soulblight part of this series, which is obviously reviewing all the vampire units, because there's so many heroes within this segment of the army. And obviously when we go forward in this video, because we've still got things like, you know, Neferaz and Manfred, and so many other masteries of the creatures of the night to review in this video, we'll see actually how much of this stuff can stack up on top of each other to really get the most out of some of you guys. Because you might look at some of the war scrolls in Soulblight Gravelords and go, oh, well, it's alright, but you know, it's not the most punchiest. But once you put all these extra abilities on top, a little bit like Slaves of Darkness, when you look at some of the units, you go, that's alright, but it doesn't really seem any special. But then when you put the God-marked abilities on top of them, you go, oh, right, yeah, that's quite good. You know, Chosen can really mince things they actually get to combat. So yeah, anyway, a bit of a ramble on there, but I just wanted to say where I think Radhika can be useful. And basically where you see the 315 points is quite a lot of points, but I think it can be justified with that one. And again, if you've got experience with Radhika The Beast, let me know that in the comments. It'd be great to hear. And then the next one we're going to talk about is going to be Berladima Volgar, the first of the Vargas. And I think that is how it's pronounced. We will be referring to her as Belle for the rest of this video. So, she in the lore is little is known of the mysterious first of the Vargas. When she and her Lupin packs hunt, the enemy is overcome by a storm of savage claws and slavering fangs. Their champion hideously transfigured by the cruel and ancient matriarch. So, lovely lady by the sounds of things. On the tabletop, she's going to cost you 200 points, so not really that many points, you know, 115 less than Radhika The Beast that we just looked at, and actually going to be only 50 points more than Radhika The Wolf, to be fair. But obviously, Radhika The Wolf is probably not really taking that much, I'm just thinking, so we're probably more comparing her to things like a Vampire Lord, etc. And again, she is unique, she's a leader, and she's a one-model unit. Going on to a War Scroll, Belle Volgar is a named character that is a single model. She is armed with a time-worn scimitar. If this model is included in a Soulblight Gravelords Army vehicle, so she counts as being the general as the other general, blah, blah, blah. We've already been through that. Mount, essentially, her wolves count as a mount. And then going on to her will stat, she's got a 10-inch movement, so very fast. Obviously, she is riding a wolf at the end of the day. She's got a 4+ save, a bravery 10, and 9 wounds. So a nice amount of wounds. A 4+ save, yeah, not fantastic. You know, just bear in mind a normal Vampire Lord has a 3+ save, but I suppose it has a shield. That means anything, because someone needs to tell that to the Black Knights. Going on with the bravery, that's normal obviously, but the 9 wounds is probably the best thing about it with that 10-inch movement. Going on to the weapons, we have the melee weapons. So we have the Times War Sword. So this is a 1-inch range, 3 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1, D3 damage. So worse than a Vampire Sword, obviously. And then the Lupin Fangs and Claws. So this is a 1-inch range, 6 attacks, 4s and 4s, no render 1 damage. So basically like a direwolf there. But she doesn't sound fantastic in her combat ability. However, she is there for her supportive capabilities. And that's what we're going to go into now with the abilities. As you can see, she's got a long list of things she can do on her War Scroll, more than just her stats. So the first one is the Hunger, which we've already been through. The second one is First of Vargas. So add 1 to the cast and dispelling and unbinding rolls for this model. In addition, roll a dice before you allocate a wound or mortal wound to this model if it is within 3 inches of any friendly direwolf units. On a 3+, that wound or mortal wound is allocated to one of those units instead of this model. Now, I think if you were to do this, you're a horrendous person, and you should always take the bullet instead of your dog. You know, you should always make sure that your dog survives as long as possible, and I wish more films did that. But that's a pretty good ability. It's similar to things that we see like the Necromancer and what we just saw for Radhika The Wolf, where the whole he passes the damage on to the Night Guard. And then obviously Necromancer finishes anything that's summonable. So direwolf is quite limiting, but I'm always going to have direwolves on my list anyway. So at the end of the day, that's pretty damn good. Especially when you look at things like if you take her with Radhika, he's summoning on some direwolves, obviously if he's the Beast variant. So yeah, I do like that, and it makes her stay alive a bit longer because that 4+8 is not fantastic. Going on to magic, so Belle is a wizard and she can cast 2 spells and unbind 2 spells. She knows 2 spells as well, which is fantastic. It's very unusual for her 200-point wizard to actually know 2 unique spells. And the first one is the Learcan Curse. So, it has a casting value of 7. If successfully cast, pick 1 enemy unit within 18 inches of the caster and is visible to them. That unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. If any models in that unit were slain by this spell, before removing the last slain model, you can add 1 unit of dire wolves to your army equal to the number of models in the enemy unit that were slain by this spell. Set up the new unit within 3 inches of the slain model's unit and then remove the slain model from play. So I think that is very good. It's also a way to bog down the enemy and things. It's like when you summon Chaos Spawns and stuff, or Zeech and Slaves of Darkness, etc. And what I like to do here as well is obviously go for those enemy units with 1 wound, and then you could have potentially 3 direwolves pop on. And that's 6 wounds for the enemy to deal with. That's going to be a real pain in their ass. And again, what I would say is that you're only going to be using this spell if you want to bog down an enemy unit, and that enemy unit has to have a small wound characteristic, like no more than 2 wounds. If you want to try and get at least 1 direwolf on to either bog them down in combat, or if you want to have that direwolf as an extra unit that you can just have running around just attacking objectives, something like that. Or maybe because you haven't got any more spells that can do mortal wounds to the enemy, and this is just a way to do D3. But outside of those remits, obviously the spell's not really that useful. And then going on to the next spell, which is Under a Killing Moon. So Under a Killing Moon has a casting value of 6. It's successfully cast until your next hero phase. If the unmodified hit roll for an attack made with a melee weapon by a friendly Soulblight Gravelords unit wholly within 12 inches of the caster is a 6, that attack inflicts 2 hits on the target instead of 1. Make a wound and save roll for each hit. That's fantastic. Like we've already mentioned, there's so many things in this army that really benefit from being buffed, and this spell is absolutely great. Put it on Blood Knights, for example, Explosion 6s on them, fantastic. You can really do a lot with this spell, and it's great how, I just want to say as a side note, that a lot of these things, they're not like for her Soulblight Gravelord Vargas Dynasty units will benefit from it. Will be an absolute pain in the arse. Like for example, you can put Bell in Castellet where Blood Knights are the best as just that extra bit of buff on them, and obviously there's countless other units in this army that would benefit from that as well. And I think that's fantastic that it's an aura ability as well. You don't pick something, so you're not having to make that hard decision. And also it lasts until your next hero phase, which means it could last an incredible amount of time. And then going on to her command ability, she has Pack Alpha. So you can use this command ability at the start of your hero phase. If you do so, pick 1 friendly direwolves unit wholly within 12 inches of this model. That unit is eligible to fight in the combat phase if it is within 6 inches of an enemy unit instead of 3, and it can pile in that extra 3 inches when it does. So this is incredibly useful. Like I've already talked about with the zombies, they have that 6-inch piling, which is huge. Very few things in the games have, like, to the point where, I don't know if you're very experienced in this game, very experienced in a lot of the armies, you could probably list all the units that do have that, because it is very, very few. So being able to put that on your direwolves, which you're going to want to take with her anyway, and in Vargas you're going to want to take them, it's very useful indeed, and it just means that you can have that extra movement when you pile in. It's not essentially just to get more guys in combat, it's just to have that extra movement. So yeah, I will always say that that ability is good. Again, it costs you a command point to do, so is it worth that? Because it is only direwolves, it's not like you're making Graveguard pile in extra, etc. What I will say is that your direwolves are already fast, is making them even faster, and command points in 3rd edition, a lot of the time you have them coming out your arse anyway, so it's not really too much of a sacrifice. And then going on with Belle's keyword, she's got Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Vargas Dynasty, Hero, Wizard, Vampire Lord, and Belle Volgar. So that is her keywords. And for 200 points, I'd say she's a steal. She casts 2 spells, she's got 2 unique spells, and she gives quite a lot of support to the rest of your army as well. And she's not terrible in the sense of she's got 6 wounds, 4+ save, she can pass on damage to direwolves, and her attacks aren't awful. So I would say she's worth the 200 points, and she can be popular in some lists, and in Vargas Dynasty, almost an auto-include. So now, that is all of the non-monster Soulblight Gravelord vampire heroes covered. So we're going to now move on to the monster ones, and we're going to start from Vargas. Now we're going to go on to Vengori. So the first one we're going to look at is going to be the Vengorian Lord. And a little bit of lore for it. Twisted by the power of Unbound Alcana, Vengorian Lords embody the nightmarish true nature of the Soulblight vampires. Unable to bear the sight of their own reflection, they wield magics of rust and clotting, revealing in their own self-loathing. So the Vengorian Lord, as well as the Mother of Nightmares, is actually a model that I really do like, and I certainly will own at some point. I know some people don't agree with that, and that's absolutely fine. So going on with the Vengorian Lord, though, on the tabletop, it's going to cost you 280 points. So for a monster, that's pretty cheap, especially in things like Legion of Nagash, where we basically had a Vampire Lord and then a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, nothing in between. Now we've got loads of options, like all the ones we've just been through, and then a Vengorian Lord as well. And of course, it's a leader, and it is, for once, a not unique. So that means you can give it an artifact, command trait, etc. Very nice to do it at the last few we've been reading. None of that customization at all. And of course, it is a one model unit. Going on to its War Scroll, a Vengorian Lord is a single model armed with a Nightmare Saber, Gore-drenched talons, and an impaling tail. So it can fly as well, which is fantastic. And going on to its wheel stats, we've got a 12-inch movement, so very fast, nice to see. We have a 3+ save, which is brilliant, and 10 wounds. The nice thing about it having 10 wounds, it means it doesn't have a damage table, so it nicely fits into that gap there, whilst being pretty survivable with that 3+ save. Going on to its weapons, it has 3 melee weapons. First one, the Nightmare Saber, so this is 1-inch range, 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1 rend, 2 damage, so like an unrandom version of a vampire sword. And then going on to the next weapon, which is the Gore-drenched talons, which is a 3-inch range, 3 attacks, 4s and freeze, -1 rend, d6 damage. Very nice there, but I can tell you when I've used this guy, everything's fantastic until you actually go to rolling for this attack, and then you'll fluff all your dice because it's the good one. Then going on to the last one, which is Impaling Tail, which is 1-inch range, d6 attacks, 4s and 4s, no rend, 1 damage. I mean, you might get 1 damage through or something, just a bonus thing at the end to maybe do some damage to the enemy. And then its overall attacks are not too bad. Quite random because the damage dealer is that d6, but for a very cheap hero monster, to be honest with you, because that Gore-drenched talons is exactly the same attacks as a Zombie Dragon's Maw, apart from it hasn't got -2 rend, it's only got -1. So it's pretty good there, to be honest with you, especially how in 3rd edition it's all about those hero monsters with everything else you can stack on them. So he does very well with his attacks, I believe. And then he's got more to come though. So in his abilities, he's got Nightmare Marasma. So while an enemy unit is within 3 inches of any friendly models with this ability, worsen the rend characteristic of that unit's melee weapons by 1 to a minimum of dash. And that's absolutely fantastic. There's a reason why the Vengorian Lord is often chucked into Soulblight Gravelord lists. Quite commonly, he was put with Nagash as well, just to make Nagash completely unkillable. And even if you're not running Nagash, he's just great in there to make the enemy -1 to their rend, which is brilliant. Or worse than their rend by 1 is a better way of saying it. And then take on Neferata as well if you like to, and she can debuff the enemy's attacks. So he's a very good piece to have, and especially if that's not a command base or anything, it's just the thing he does. And then that also makes his 3+ save with 10 wounds even more survivable. Especially how rend is quite important in this edition with how good saves can be. Because you put all out defense in this guy, let's say the enemy only had -1 rend, they've lost that. He's got all out defense on him, now he has a 2+ save. Brilliant, right? Going on to the next ability, which is Undeniable Impulse. So at the start of your hero phase, roll a dice for this model. If you roll is equal to or less than the number of the current battle rounds, until your next hero phase, this model can run and still charge later in the same turn. However, this model cannot use command abilities until your next hero phase. So what I'd say is the command ability you got for this guy is pretty good in the right situation, but generally you want to be running in charge, and especially early on, which is why this is a shame on how it's worded that you've got to roll under. So basically you've got more chance of being able to run in charge as the game goes on in the later rounds. It could be useful to run around to quickly grab things or wipe out an enemy unit here or there or take that objective, blah, blah, blah. But you really want to be getting that early on, running and charging, because you might want to be needing to heal later on in the game. But it's an interesting mechanic and I like it, and it's all completely situational at the end of the day. Then he's also got the hunger as a way to heal as well. So we said this guy's pretty survivable, and he's got that, like all the vampire guys in this book basically. Going on to the next one we've got, which is magic, and this model is a wizard, and it can attempt to cast 1 spell in your hero phase and attempt to unbind 1 spell in the enemy hero phase. It knows the Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield, and the Clotted Deloge spell. So his spell has a casting value of 6. It successfully cast, pick 1 enemy unit within 12 inches of this caster and add 1 to the wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons that target that unit until your next hero phase. I think this is particularly very good. With him, it makes most of his wounding on 2s, And then anything that's not really that important, which is the Impaling Tail, now it's on a 3. So I do like that, but it also means that obviously he's a great buff piece for other things. It does cast on a 6, so it means that fairly reliable getting it off. You know, if, let's say the enemy couldn't unbind you for some reason, this means on more chances than not, you'll be getting it off. And then if you even do run Mannfred in your list, who also gives that +1 to wound, it means Mannfred can buff something on one side, and then the Vengorian Lord can buff something on the other side. So I do think that's a great spell, and it doesn't really overlap with anything else in the army. You don't really have anything else in the army that gives +1 to wound rolls off the top of my head that's easily available to anything. And what I would also say is this just says anything that targets that enemy unit. So if you wanted to, means allies would benefit from it as well. Then going on to his command ability, we have Festering Feast. So you can use his command ability at the end of the combat phase if any attacks made by a friendly Soulblight Gravelords unit in that phase destroyed an enemy unit. If you do so, you can heal up to D6 wounds allocated to that Soulblight Gravelords unit. The same unit cannot benefit from this command ability more than once per phase. So if you get those requirements done, he's got another way to heal D6 wounds, which is absolutely fantastic. If on the undeniable impulse thing, you rolled correctly, essentially. So that's useful. Also putting it on things like a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, just to give them extra heal. Neferata, just to make her basically healing so much. Mannfred, anything really that doesn't really want to die. Nagash is another example what you could put it on, and that's why he paired quite well with him. So yeah, I think this guy is very good for what he is and for how many points he costs. You know, for 280 points, depending on your list, obviously, I think he's a steal. If you can put him in there, chuck him in there. And then on his keywords, he's got Death, Vampire, Soulblight, Gravelords, Monster, Hero, Wizard, Vengorian Lord. Because I think he is predominantly a buff piece for your army. And when I mean buff piece, I mean buff/debuff in the enemy army. You know, that's why he's there for support. But he can actually do some damage while he's there as well. And he can do his own thing if he needs to. And the enemy can't really ignore him because he could do a bit of damage himself, like I mentioned. But the other thing is that if the enemy do want to take him out, because he can do a bit of damage and also he is debuffing the shit out of them, and they don't like that, they're going to need to do quite a bit of focus fire on him to actually kill him dead. Because a lot of the heroes that we mentioned in this army have got that self-regeneration with that hunger, at least with the healing. So that means that they can't really just pepper things. They have to kill something until it's dead, which really is very thematic with the vampires. And it's very nice to see it come through here onto the rules. And then as a direct comparison, we're going to look at Lualka Bao, Mother of Nightmares. And again, I think that's how it's pronounced. And she is definitely my preferred in terms of aesthetics that I would build when I get this kit eventually. At some point, I do look forward to that. But going on to her in the lore, the Mother of Nightmares is the queen of the Avangori dynasty. Within this monstrous vampire, an eternal battle rages, for though she desires to lead her kin against only the worthiest foes, her thirst sometimes drives her to the most terrible slaughter. And she has a very fascinating story that details how she became what she was. She wasn't essentially born like that. She got mutated. And I believe she was actually fighting an other monster. And in that fight, she ended up becoming a monster. So the irony runs deep within Grand Alliance death in general. Anything to do with Nagash. But then to talk about her in the game, she costs 285 points, which I think is the slightest difference in any character versus generic way to build a model we've seen. Like compare, Gordrak to a normal Mega Boss or Maw Crusher. The Mother of Nightmares compared to a normal Vengorian Lord is 5 points. So really, they're basically the same. So let's see what we're going to get for the extra 5 points, shall we? Obviously, she's a leader. She is unique, though, so she can't take an artifact, a command trait, etc. And she is, of course, a one-model unit. Going on to her description, it says that she is a named character that has a single model. She is armed with a sword, we're going to call that, and then a gore-drenched talons and an impaling tail. And then if she is taken in the Avangori dynasty, she counts as being the general, what we've seen before, but for the Vargas. And then she also flies, which is very good. Going on to her will stat, she's got a 12-inch movement, a 3+ save, bravery 10 and 11 wounds, so a 1 more wound than her counterpart, being the generic one, so it's nice to see that. And she, again, does not have a damage table, which is very good. Going on to the melee weapons, she has the sword, which is a 1-inch range, 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1 rend, 2 damage. So it's the same as the normal Vengorian Lord sword, which is a little bit disappointing. You think name character. And then you've got the Gordran's Challenge, which is a 3-inch range, 3 attacks, 4s and 3s, -1 d6 damage. And then the Impaling Tail, which is a 1-inch range, d6 attacks, 4s and 4s, no rend, and 1 damage. And that is all the same as the normal Vengorian Lord, which I personally think is a bit lazy. Make it have an extra attack here or there, or an extra rend, or an extra damage. Just make it something special because it's the named character. I get it's only 5 points more, but make it 10 points more. Make it more special, I don't care. Then going on to the abilities, we have Champion of the Avangori. So after this model makes a charge move, you can pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of this model and roll a number of dice equal to the charge roll for that charge move. For each 5+, that enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wound, which is very good. It's something that I've done for my Chaos Chariots when I use them, which have the same ability and really can do a lot of mortal wounds. I remember charging a Chaos Chariot into a unit of salamanders, and it basically already wiped out all the skinks the salamanders had, the skink handlers supporting them, which was great. And yeah, something that should definitely not be forgotten. It's a very good ability to remember, especially, if you spike your dice and you roll a 12, that is easily going to be 4 mortal wounds on the average to that enemy unit, so definitely worth remembering. And then the next one we've got is Nightmare Merisma, which is the same, make the enemy subtract 1 from their rend. And then you've got the Undeniable Impulse, which again is the same as what we saw for the Vengorian Lord. Is he going to be able to run in charge, or is she going to be able to run in charge, or is she going to remember to be able to do a command ability? And then we've got the Hunger, which is healing, which we've done again. Again, a lot of repeats here, but good ability, so we don't mind. And then going on to magic, it says that she is a wizard. She can cast 1 spell in your hero phase and bind 1 spell in the enemy hero phase. And the spell she knows is Death's Downpour. So Death's Downpour's casting value of 8 is successfully cast. Charge rolls made for enemy units within 12 inches of this model are halved until your next hero phase. That's fantastic, as the amount of times I have said in this game that the game is quite often one on movement is huge. For example, I've always gone on about the Khorne Demon Prince, whose command ability I believe is half charge rolls, and it's really saved my bacon quite a few times when I've been playing Slaves of Darkness. So the fact that she's got it as well is great, but the problem is the Khorne Demon Prince was just a command ability he did, and hers is a spell, which is quite, which is good, but it is a casting value of 8, so not the easiest thing to cast, especially if she only gets to cast 1 spell. You might not choose to do this one. And then going on to the command abilities, we have a Queen Amongst Monsters. You can use this command ability once per turn in your hero phase. If you do so, pick 1 enemy unit on the battlefield until your next hero phase. Add 1 to the hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons used by friendly Soulblight Gravelord monsters that target that enemy unit. So that is good, but bear in mind you could do all-out attack if you wanted to get that add 1 to hit rolls. But if you're going, solid, you're going an Avangorian Dynasty army, you just got nothing but monsters, so you want to have a good time, obviously this is better than all-out attack, is what I will say. So my thoughts to her overall, I think she plays a different role to the normal Vengorian Lord. I like it that there's a bit of difference. I think for the extra 5 points you do get different things though. So you're not getting that +1 to wound against the enemy. That's gone. And yes, you do get Death's Downpour instead, but the casting value of an 8, I think it makes it pretty unreliable, so you won't be doing it much. And then when it comes to the command abilities, the healing is better than what she's got, which is the +1 to hit, in my honest opinion, unless obviously you're running all monsters. And then the only other thing she had different was the charge roll meant that she could do the mortal wounds to the enemy, which is flat out better, and she's got that 1 extra wound. So I think that on her own, for the extra 5 points, she's worth it for that extra wound and the other stuff she's got. But for a support piece for your army, which really kind of needs to be, and that's how I see the Vengorian Lord. The Vengorian Lord is better, but not because it's 5 points cheaper, just because it has a better command ability. It also has a better spell, and I think that really does win it for me. But it's a fantastic model, and like I said, if I was to buy it myself at some point in the future, I will be building as her and I will be running her, because she's not that much worse than she's only 5 points more. So they both have their good things and their bad things, but I just feel like overall the Vengorian Lord you're probably going to see more use out of. And now moving on to more classical vampire big monstrous units, and of course that is going to be starting with the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, the common occurrence of one of these in many death armies since the start of Age of Sigmar, and I imagine there was quite a few of these in the vampire counts of Warhammer Fantasy. This is a model that has been on the table more than enough times than I can remember when I go to tournaments and stuff, because there was a thing called an Ethereal Amulet that made this thing incredibly nasty. But how is this classic model doing these days? So, a little bit of lore firstly. The proudest and most martial of vampires take to battle astride terrifying undead drakes. Armed with such a potent mount, they are capable of turning the tide of battle alone, striking down their rivals and supping their blood from enchanted goblets. Okay, so this monster on the tabletop is going to cost you 435 points. It's a leader, it's behemoth, and of course it is a single model unit. Going on to his war scroll, his description. A vampire lord on zombie dragon is a single model armed with one of the following weapon options: a death lance or vampiric sword. Then it says the mount, so this model's zombie dragon attacks with its pestilence breath, snapping maw, and sword-like claws, and then it lastly says that it can fly. No surprises there. Going on to its wheel stats, they have a 14-inch movement, but it will get worse as it takes more damage. It's like a lot of monsters, but like I was saying, the Vengorian Lord doesn't do that, so you know a nice thing about it there. Going on to its save, it has a 3+ save, which is absolutely fantastic. This thing always had a 3+ save. It's basically the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon used to have a 4+ save, but if it had a shield, it had a 3+ save. You always gave it a shield. Going on to its bravery, it's 10, and its wounds is 14, so a chunky monster indeed before we get into these big sort of god type of monsters. And then going on to its weapons, it actually has a lot, and surprisingly for a death unit, it actually has a missile weapon, and this is going to be Pestilence Breath. So this is a 9-inch range, 1 attack, 3's to hit, 2's to wound, but that will get worse the more damage it takes, refer to the damage table. -3 rend, d6 damage. That is really good, and just what I want to mention with that as well is going on to the abilities, quickly jumping down there. You've got Pestilence Breath, so when you attack with this model's Pestilence Breath, roll a dice before making the hit roll for the attack. If the roll is less than or equal to the number of models in the target unit, the attack scores a hit without needing to make a hit roll. Okay, so this I would say is very, very useful, because obviously you're going against anything porter, anything with at least 6 models, you're automatically hitting, then you just need a 2 to wound, and then -3 rend, which if it's a unit that has more than 6 models, or at least 6 even, then a -3 rend, they probably don't have a save, so it's just going to be a flat d6 damage. So you just need to roll that 2 to wound. A lot easier said than done, but nice for a death shooting attack. Again, only 9 inches, so it is short range, but no really surprise there for a breath attack. Going on to the melee weapons, where this thing does excel, we have the Death Lance, so this is a 1-inch range, 3 attacks, 3's and 3's, -1, 2 damage. Or the other option, the Vampiric Sword, which is a 1-inch range, 4 attacks, 3's and 3's, -1, d3 damage. So firstly, I'll just say go Vampiric Lance every time. Firstly, I think it looks a lot cooler. Secondly, it's just better in the game on average. And then going on to the things that you automatically get, you're going to have the Snapping Maw. So this is a 3-inch range, 3 attacks, 4's and 3's, -2, rend d6 damage. So basically just a standard dragon maw attack, which is not bad. Obviously the 4 to hit is not very nice, so if you can get your +1 to hit, that would be amazing for it. And the -2 rend is good. And again, like the damage for the Pestilence Breath, the d6 damage is incredibly swingy, but don't completely rely on it, but it could spike and you could do a horrendous amount of damage to your enemy, so fun times. Going on to the last weapon, which is going to be the Sword-like Claws. This is a 2-inch range. Now, it starts with 7 attacks, but it will get worse for first to the damage table the more wounds this guy takes. But just bear in mind that of all the weapons, only the missile one, the Pestilence Breath, and the Sword-like Claws gets affected by damage table. So that's not really bad at all. So anyway, it's got 7 attacks to start with. It's a 4 to hit, 3 to wound, -1 rend, 2 damage. So I find that obviously where the Snapping Maw can be quite swingy, you feel like that's where the big damage is going to come from. And I often find that it's just the Sword-like Claws, because your opponent, let's say you get quite lucky, you've given this guy quite a few buffs, so he's got +1 to hit, +1 to wound. Who knows, he's got an extra attack. And let's basically just say you make the enemy roll 4 or 5 save rolls and they fail all of them. Let's say they only had a 5 save anyway, they failed. This has happened to me quite a few times, so it's just an example. And then before you know it, the enemy's failed 5 save rolls or something, and then it's just like, oh, well, that's 10 damage. And then you go, wow, yeah, that was quite a surprising amount of damage, where I didn't think this is where it was going to come from on the model. So that was very good there. And then something just to mention as well, as I've already said for the Blood Knights about stacking them and making them better, take them in Castellet, same with this guy, because it is a Vampire Castellet unit. Take the Rousing Commander command trait, like I already mentioned when I talked about the Blood Knight, to make this guy benefit from the two things part of the Might of the Crimson Keep, which is going to be the Bloody Strength, and then obviously it's going to be the Stolen Vitality, and that means until the end of that phase this guy's got 15 wounds. I mean, that's cool, but the very cool thing is it means the more attack is minimum going to be 2 damage, because it's already going to be at least 1 damage from the d6, but you get that extra damage from it, so that's fantastic. So you could potentially do 7 damage from the more in each one of those attacks, but also the Sword-like Claws are now 3 damage, which is great. And then the Death Lance is now 3 damage. Now, if you want to, if you're going to go the Vampiric Sword, again, it's going to be at least 2 damage with the D3, etc. But go the Lance, because we'll get onto that now, shall we? Let's skip ahead, because we're going to look at the ability called Death Lance Charge. So add 2 to the damage characteristic of this model's Death Lance and improve the rend characteristic of that weapon by 1. This model made a charge move in the same turn. So now that means each one of those Death Lances attacks that go through to the enemy is going to be 5 damage. That is really good. When I've used this, it's horrendous. Get all these bell whistles off, but like I say, the Rousing Commander, that just automatically goes off only once per game, etc. I explained it in the Castellet part of my review, so you can go check that out in that video. I think in part 2 it was, for the Soulblight Gravelords Army, if you haven't watched it already. And that's just a fantastic command trait, especially when stacked with things like this, because the Death Lance is now 5 damage on the charge. You might go, well, you might not get the charge. Yeah, you might get some cheeky eels come in and charge you first and all that sort of thing, but this thing moves 14 inches and it can fly, so it can most of the time get the charge when it wants to. And now that means that you've got 5 damage for each one of those lances, a minimum of 2 damage to potential 7 damage from those snapping maw, and then 3 damage from those sword-like claws. Give this guy an extra attack and give him +1 to hit and wound from Manfred, and then you're, loving life really at that point. And when I mean chuck all this stuff on them, all reasonably done, because you go Castellet, take the Rousing Commander, take Manfred for the +1 to hit and wound, and just take a Vampire Lord to give him an extra attack. These are things you can do if you really want to buff up your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon to make him absolutely horrendous in combat. So yeah, this is a really, really good thing, and to be honest, I haven't really tried it out enough, but I'd love the idea of running, because I've got loads of these, like 3 of these in a Castellet army, just see how they do. I think could be a load of fun. Not really too sure for your opponent, but it could be a lot of fun for yourself. But yeah, so I think this is fantastic in that combination. And then just to go over the abilities, the last few things. The only ability we haven't covered is the Hunger. I've explained that does. He kills something, heals D3. Shame he's lost the Chalice, because they mentioned in the bloody law it's got the Chalice to drink and heal D6 wounds per game. Yeah, it can't do that anymore, so annoying and very naughty of them to mention it in there. So going on to the last thing though, it's going to be magic. This model is a wizard and can cast 1 spell in your turn and bind 1 in the enemy's turn, etc. Of course it can pick a spell from the Lord of the Vampires, but the one it gets in its War Skull is going to be Curse of Exaggeration. If that's how it's pronounced, God knows, presumably not. But anyway, the Curse, as we shall call it, has a casting value of 6. If successfully cast, pick 1 enemy unit within 8 inches of the caster that is visible to them. That unit suffers 1 mortal wound if the mortal wound is allocated to a model in that unit and not negated, and that model is not slain by that mortal wound. You can roll a dice. On a 4+, that model suffers 1 mortal wound, and you can roll another dice. If that mortal wound is allocated and not negated, and the model is not slain, keep rolling a dice in the same way until either no mortal wounds are inflicted, the mortal wound is negated, or the model is slain. So there's 2 things here, is that off the bat it's got worse, because it used to be like the Ferocious Maw or something where you just kept on doing mortal wounds to your opponent on a 4+ until potentially the whole unit's wiped out. But what I'd say here is, because it can only be put on 1 model in the unit, it's a bit sad. But what it might mean is that you can use it to take away models in an enemy unit. You get to pick, and then that means you can break the enemy coherency, and then they can delete half of their unit because the coherency is broken. I know that's a bit gamey, and I wouldn't really want to do it, but there's a tactic there if you are playing competitively. And then its keywords are Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Zombie Dragon, Monster, Hero, Wizard, Vampire, Lord. So what I will say there is I think this guy is more than worth his 435 points, especially in an era in the game where hero monsters are making a huge impact across all games really, with the heroic actions and the monstrous rampages that only make the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon better, and there are a lot of buffs you can give it. For example, like I said, it's fairly easy to make your Death Lance in a certain build be 5 damage each, which is just quite crazy with -2 rend at that. So I feel absolutely fantastic. Again, with that Death Lance, just to say, with the Manfred buff, 2s and 2s, what's not to love with that? So I really have a huge support with the Vampire Lord Zombie Dragon, and very glad that I am the owner of about 5 of these things. So what I'd also say is the next thing we're going to have a look at is going to be the Prince of Hordre, which is the named character version of this. And basically, don't give the guy the helmet, give him the head. Now, my one, I firstly built him as a Vampire Lord Zombie Dragon, didn't give him the helmet, and now apparently he's Prince of Hordre. So very lazy conversion potential from Games Workshop there. But let's see what's the difference with Prince of Hordre, and is he worth taking in your army over the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, because that is a very important question, because he's got a very stiff competition with this guy. So a little bit of lore starting off. From his macabre stronghold, the Crimson Keep, Prince of Hordre leads his vampiric knights as they ride to war, cursed for his past disloyalty. For Hordre now serves as the fist of Nagash, annihilating his master's enemies in displays of shocking violence. So basically, he tried to kill Nagash at one point and try to overthrow him. Very bad thing to do, obviously. I very much condone that sort of behaviour. And because of that, he was basically imprisoned in this floating Bloodkeep fortress that now travels across the realms, going to where Nagash needs work done. And he cannot leave the fortress for any other reasons apart from to fight on the battlefield. So going on to his rules though in the game. So he's going to cost 455 points, so 20 more points when you're building your army list in a time, ladies and gentlemen, where points is very much of the essence, and when we do not have many points to spare. So we really need some justification here. He is also a leader and a behemoth like the normal Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, but he's also unique, so no command trait or artifact. So, another bad thing. Going on to his war scroll though, Prince of Hordre is a named character that is a single model. He is armed with the Blood Lance. It goes on to say, if this model is included in a Soulblight Gravelords Army with the Castellet Dynasty lineage keyword, this model is treated as a general in addition to the model that is chosen to be the army general. Fantastic. So you're not missing out on that command trait or anything that's going to make him amazing in your Castellet army, because you're going to take this guy in Castellet. You're not going to miss out on that rousing commander command trait, which we've already mentioned. Going on, it also says his amount. So Prince of Hordre's Zombie Dragon Shardmere, how it's pronounced. I've done a lore video in Prince of Hordre, so go check it out. I would have researched the names properly then. But anyway, attacks with its snapping maw and sword-like claws, so just like a normal zombie dragon. And also, it can fly. So going on to its will stats, it's got 14-inch movement, a 3+ save, bravery 10, 14 wounds, exactly the same as a normal Vampire Lord Zombie Dragon. Would have maybe been nice if this thing had 16 wounds, just to buff it up. It is the named character version, or maybe 15 wounds, would have been nice. But going on to his weapons, he does not have a missile weapon from what you can see, but he does have a missile weapon in the terms of an ability, so we'll get to that in a moment. But the meta weapons, he's got the Blood Lance, so this is a 2-inch range, 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, -2 rend, 2 damage, so off the bat it's got an extra rend, and he's got an extra attack with it, so thank God it's not just the same thing. Going on to his next one, he's got the Snapping Maw, so this is a 3-inch range, 3 attacks, 4s and freeze, -2 rend, d6 damage, and the Sword-like Claws are 7 attacks to start with, 2-inch range, 4s and freeze, -1, 2 damage, so exactly the same there. So at least his lance is better, like I say. Going on to the abilities, he's got the Hunger, so he kills something and heals D3. Wounds. Going on to the next thing though, he does have the Chalice of Blood. So once per battle in your hero phase, you can heal up to D6 wounds allocated to this model. So the other Vampire Lord Zombie Dragon used to have this as well. So I don't really want to say that, oh, well, I suppose a good thing about Prince of Hordre is he has this really cool Chalice. No, absolutely not. So now that means that my normal Vampire Lord Zombie Dragons, despite being modelled with a Chalice, do no longer have the Chalice of Blood ability. So it's kind of like more annoying than going, oh, well, that's one good thing about Prince of Hordre. It's just annoying now that my other guy lost it. But anyway, let's continue this streak of reading information out and complaining. We go on to the Blood Lance. So add 2 to the damage characteristics of this model's Blood Lance and improve the rend characteristic of the weapon by 1 if this model made a charge in the same turn. So again, 14-inch movement, fly is probably going to be getting those charges in. The good thing to mention there is because he's obviously got those extra attacks and that extra rend already, what that means is you can do all the buffs on the stacks to make this guy be 5 damage on the charge. In that case, he's going to have 4 attacks, isn't he? And then if you gave him actually the Vampire Lord on foot, their command ability, he's going to have 5 attacks. Manfred's in there as well. Why not? 2s and 2s. -3 rend, 5 damage. Absolutely lovely. What's not to like about that? Your enemy is definitely going to fail at least one of them. And then going on to the next ability, we have the Breath of Shaiish. So this is where his shooting attack is. So in your shooting phase, you can pick one enemy unit within 9 inches of this model that is visible to it and roll a dice. On a 3+, that unit suffers a number of mortal wounds equal to the Breath of Shaiish value shown on this model's damage table. So again, the thing to mention here is it does get worse as time goes on. I think it used to be a flat 6 to start with, but I might be wrong. Anyway, it starts with D6 for this, which is quite good. Basically, it's funny because it's kind of like the normal Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragons breath attack. That's a 9-inch range anyway. You're normally automatically hitting unless you're going against, single model units and stuff. And then you just needed 2 to do the wounding, and then the -3 rend meant that the enemy a lot of the time wasn't saving against it, and then it was just D6 damage anyway. So it's very similar to this, but this is just obviously a more reliable, because it doesn't matter if you're going to go against a other big monstrous hero from the enemy or a block of 30 models. Whatever it is, you just need that 3 up to get it off. And then it's D6 mortal wounds. I think personally it should be maybe a 2 up, because it is the Breath of Shaiish, but obviously Loris up here, rules down there. But if you do get off, D6 mortal wounds could be nice, obviously incredibly swingy, but it's just another point in this army where you've got their mortal wound output. And what I will say as well is obviously as his damage table gets worse, the Breath of Shaiish gets worse. It's annoying that it's tied into that. I think should be its own separate thing, just always D6. But if you're thinking, I've already taken, I don't know, let's say 7, 9 wounds, so I'm only doing 3 now, or I've taken 10, 12 wounds, so in D3 now, at that point you're probably going to have used your Chalice of Blood to heal those D6 wounds in your hero phase, so it should bump it up as well to get those extra mortal wounds out. Then going on to magic, Prince of Hordre is a wizard. He can attempt to cast 1 spell your turn and bind 1 in the enemy turn, etc. He knows the Quick Blood spell, so Quick Blood has a casting value of 7. If successfully cast, add 1 to the hit and wound rolls for attacks made with meta weapons by the caster until your next hero phase. So what this means is when I keep chucking out Manfred's name all the time, I'll take Manfred here, take him there, he's not that much expensive, he's really worth it, just do it there so I can prove a point and make things sound much better than they actually are. You don't need Manfred for this, so you can just have that lovely 2s and 2s for the attacks, and also, as far as I'm aware, it's going to benefit the monster as well. So you're going to have 3s and 2s and 3s and 2s for both that maw and the claws. So very nice there, makes your attacks much more reliable. Going on to the command ability, we have the Fist of Nagash. So you can use this command ability once per turn in your hero phase. If you do so, pick one other friendly Soulblight Gravelords hero that is wholly within 12 inches of this model and within 3 inches of any enemy units that hero can fight. So what I'm going to say to you now is the summary of going, is this guy as good as a Vampire Lord Zombie Dragon? Or really the question is he better? What I'm going to say is, why not both? Because this command ability pairs really nicely with a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, because you can make that Vampire Lord and the Zombie Dragon fight. And obviously that's great if the enemies Alpha Strike you and you're just trying to fight them off out of your turn, your first turn, or that sort of thing. But also, all this lovely things I'm saying, the blood lance on the charge, it's doing this amazing damage, that bloody lance. And then you go, yeah, but why is he stuck in combat? Well, he's stuck in combat and you've got the Vampire Lord, Zombie Dragon and Prince of Hordre next to each other. Then Prince of Hordre is going to go, right, clear them off in the hero phase so then we can move on to the next thing later this turn to kill the rest of the enemy army. And even if you can't kill it in the hero phase, you've bloody done a dent in it, I would imagine. So you do that on that Vampire Lord, Zombie Dragon, and it just makes a really nice team. Again, you put this thing on, Manfred can throw a few punches, we'll get to in a moment and stuff, in the combat phase. And obviously Nagash would massively benefit from this because it is a Soulblight Gravelords hero, etc. But I always think that the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon and Prince of Hordre, in my experience, make a good pair, a good team. But if you had to only pick one, which one are we picking? I think overall, the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon it's just going to save you that 20 points. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but that 20 points will easily help you out, squeeze something else in when you're, getting really tight with your points towards the end of your list building. As we do know, that does happen quite a bit. And I think that the Prince of Hordre, he does make up for the extra 20 points, but he's not a necessity in the terms of, I have to have him for the extra 20 points. You could easily make justifications for both of them. But what I would say is, at least for the Prince of Hordre, is a lot of the time the name character versions just clearly are not worth it in comparison to a normal Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon or whatever they're being compared to. But luckily, Prince of Hordre, he does stand on his own feet a little bit for justifications of why you take him over a normal Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. But going back to another Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, he can take an Arfag command trait at the end of the day to make him even better. So he is the best overall. But I think, interestingly, they make a good team. And just to say, Prince of Hordre, his keywords, he's got Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Castellet Dynasty, Zombie Dragon, Monster, Hero, Wizard, and Prince for Hordre. So not a bad choice in your army. And then next up, we've got potentially the best character in the whole game, if not certainly one of my favourites. And that's going to be Neferata, the Mortarch of Blood. So we're going to go into a little bit of her lore here. And then obviously she is basically, we're getting to the pinnacle of the death heroes. And in particularly, obviously, the Soulblight Gravelord heroes. So we'll go over her, and then the next one is going to be Manfred, and that will be the end of this video. But Neferata, I just say that I have done a lore video just about her that you can go check out. It's in my short lore video series. But this is just going to be a little summarised version of that, obviously on her war scroll. And why I mention that now is because her lore, she's absolutely amazing. She's the first vampire. Go check it out. But anyway, so first amongst the Soulblight vampires, Neferata is a true monarch of the dead. In battle, the Nulamian Queen fights with a cruel, merciless intensity. The enemy's greatest warriors torn apart by a blur of precise and deadly strikes. So, on the tabletop, she's going to cost you 365 points, which is an absolute joy. Just want to say that these Mortarchs for ages, for years, were so heavily over point costed and so fragile with like a 4-up save and 11 wounds, and they're so much better now. So I'm just really, really grateful and thank you for Games Workshop finally making that change before we go completely into this, because now it kind of makes sense, her lore, in this whole she goes wish and killing the enemy in throughout the battlefield. It realistically, before it was she's dead, she's shot, she's gone. But now she can stand on her own 2 feet, which is always nice to see. So going on to her rules, so like I say, 365 points, lovely. Her role is that she is going to be obviously a leader, a behemoth, and also she is a unique character. Obviously, she's amazing. And then going on to her war scroll, she's got the description. Neferata is a named character. There's a single model. She is armed with the Akhmet Ha and Aken Seth. So I think that was pronounced pretty well. And then going on to the next thing, says, if this model is included in a Soulblight Gravelords army within the Legion of Blood lineage keyword, this model is treated as a general in addition to the model that is chosen to be the army general. So that's fantastic. We're not really surprised at this. We're used to see it now. We just read it for Prince of Hordre, but always good that it's included on these war scrolls. Going on to the Mount, Neferata's Dread Abyssal Nagadron attacks with its Abyssal Talons. And then Companion, Neferata is accompanied by a host of spirits that attack with their spectral claws and daggers. For rule purposes, they are treated in the same manner as a mount. And then lastly, Neferata can fly. Fantastic. Going on to her will stats, she has a movement of 16, which will get less with the damage she takes, obviously, because it's the damage table, but a movement of 16 inches and flying. Trust me, these Mortarchs zip around the battlefield. They're incredibly fast. She's got a 3+ save. She's got a bravery of 10 and 12 wounds. So that was an absolute joy, like I've already mentioned when I read it, because it used to be a 4+ save, 11 wounds would just die so quickly. And especially now, she's got so many ways to heal. So the 3+ save and the 12 wounds, she is pretty damn survivable with that. Or at defense, obviously a 2-up save at that point, so very nice. Going on to the meta weapons, we've got Akhmet Ha. So this is going to be a 1-inch range, 5 attacks, 2s and 3s, -1 rend, and 1 damage. So just a nice 2s and 3s, but we're going to get to good things about this in a moment. Then you got Aken Seth, so this is 1-inch range, 2 attacks, 2s and 3s, -2 rend, 2 damage. Nicer attack there, only 2, but the 2s and 3s and the -2 rend and 2 damage is nice. But where the damage really comes from is going to be the Abyssal Talons. This starts with 6 attacks, Force to hit, freeze to wound, -2 rend, 2 damage. So again, good, but hitting on 4s. And then the Spectral Claws and Daggers, which is a 1-inch range, 6 attacks, 5s and 4s, no rend and 1 damage. But basically because they're the Frightful Touch, which is an ability later on, but basically on a 6 to hit, mortal wound, which is the standard thing for these ghosts. And then going on to the abilities, we start with the Dagger of Jet. So at the end of any phase, if any wounds inflicted by this model's Akenha in that phase were allocated to an enemy hero and not negated, and that enemy hero has not been slain, roll a dice on a 5+, that enemy hero is slain. So I think that used to be you had to roll higher than the wounds remaining, but I think that was a while ago. I think the last version basically you needed to roll 6 for them to die. So a 5, very good. It's like the Mighty Lord of Khorne's axe ability, where you've just got a 30% chance that you're going to kill the enemy hero. So Archaon, and other Nagash, whatever, it's a good chance of killing them. Again, very extreme examples there, but just against most enemy heroes, it's a fear. And I think that's one of those things where it's not like one of those things you keep secret, and then you say to your opponent, "Oh, because I did damage against you on a 5 up, you're dead." I think it's more of a case of you tell them, and then they over worry about it, because the chances you roll on a 5 up are not in your favours. But it makes them have to worry. So it's a nice ability, and it kind of makes up for, like, she's not really a combat monster. You know, she's a monster and her combat abilities are okay. But she's more for her supportive thing she gives the army. But the fact is that she's still quite good in a fight, where I used to bring her and she used to just have a supportive role. And as soon as I got into the fight, she would just die, a bit like Arcan. Now she can kind of fight and stay alive and do some damage to the enemy as well, to be honest, and use that Dagger of Jet threat as well. So you use her more against enemy heroes and stuff. Maybe, like, you don't want to send her against anything too big. She's quite alright against most things, I would say. Then the Mortarch of Blood. So at the end of the combat phase, if any enemy models were slain by wounds inflicted by this model's attacks, in that phase, you can heal up to D6 wounds allocated to this model. So when I say she's kind of right against most things, make sure she can attack something she's definitely going to kill to heal those D6 wounds, because that is very good, especially if you've got all-out defense on her. 2-up save, 12 wounds, pretty damn good. She's making the enemy, well, there's things she's going to make the enemy debuff, we'll get to in a moment. But what that means that when the enemy, let's say, if the enemy does, 4 damage to her, they're probably doing quite well as long as they haven't just chucked everything at her. Then you can just heal all that wounds back anyway. So very survivable indeed. Yeah, and then there are obviously more ways in this army for her to heal as well. So very nice there. Frightful Touch we've already covered. Then going on to the magic. So Neferata's Wizard, she can cast 2 spells in your turn and unbind 2 in the enemy turn. The spell she has in her War Scroll is going to be Dark Mist. Has a casting value of 6. Is successfully cast. Pick 1 friendly Soulblight Gravelords unit wholly within 12 inches of the caster. Ignore negative modifiers when making save rolls for attacks that target that unit until your next hero phase. So obviously, pick something like, Blood Knights. Now they have a 3-up save, could make it a 2-up save, not taking any rend. You could also put this on your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, which now means that they've got a better version of a Ethereal Amulet, because you could do all-out defense on them. And then they have a 2-up unrendable save, etc. Put it on your Skeletons to make them harder to kill. Dire Wolves, etc. Your Screams. But obviously, put it on Neferata, and now that means that she's got, with all-out defense, obviously, a 2-up save, unrendable, healing D6 wounds at the end of the combat phase if she kills something. So you can see how she's very survivable, especially paired with her command ability, which is Twilight Allure. So you can use this command ability once per turn in your hero phase. If you do so, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by melee weapons that target friendly Soulblight Gravelords units wholly within 12 inches of this model's units until your next hero phase. So what that basically means is you're making the enemy -1 to hit within this bubble, and that 12 inches is quite big because it's your unit. So it's not like the enemy unit has to be wholly within 12 inches, it's your unit, so you can perfectly move your models around to make sure they stay wholly within 12 inches of her, and she stays in the centre and she continues to buff things, and if she needs to fight the enemy, she can fight the enemy. That's how I use her. Very much supportive, like I said. But with that, if you really want to make her survivable, 2-up save, unrendable, healing D6 wounds a turn, potentially healing more of other things. The enemy's -1 to hit. You've chucked a Vengorian Lord in there. Now they're -1 for their rend, or basically their rend is worse, and it's the best way to say it, by 1. So yeah, really, really quite good. Or to be honest with you, the bloody Vengorian Lord is pointless in this situation because she's not taking any rend anyway. But you can see how useful she can be, and she can make most of those good potential things like making the enemy rend useless and making the enemy subtract 1 from the hit rolls. It's just going to benefit other things in your army as well. So I really, really like her. It's personally, like I've already said, really nice to read through this War Scroll when it came out in Soulblight Gravelords, because Neferata is, like I said, if not my favourite character, at least in the top 3 in the game. And I always wanted to take in the game, but I always had to do it, fun or narrative, which, I say I play fun and narrative these days, but it really was pushing the boat quite far when I was saying it's for fun purposes, because I'd bring her, she didn't really get to do anything on the table because she would just die straight away, and moaning and crying for me here, but it generally happened all the time. And she was the same price as a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon in points, so it was taking her because you want to be cool, and she never got to do anything cool because she died, but now she really can, and it's like finally she can do what I really want her to do, and it's really a joy and a pleasure to use her on the tabletop now because she's actually really good. It's really quite cool. And then going on to her keywords, she's got Death and Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Death Lords, Legion of Blood, Monster, Hero, Wizard, Mortarch, Neferata. She is absolutely fantastic. Go buy her straight away. And yeah, obviously Legion of Blood, very good, but it can be taken in other legions, lineages, dynasties, whatever they want to call them, and she can still do pretty damn good as well. So yeah, that's Neferata. And then we're going to look at one of her biggest rivals, but also supposable ally, which is going to be Manfred von Carstein, who has got to be the most trustworthy vampire in Warhammer history. And in all honesty, he is just such a nice, lovely guy. He wouldn't walk on anyone to get what he wants, and he always puts others before his own needs. So Manfred von Carstein is... His lore, though, may say differently, but we'll see what it says. Few creatures are as embittered or cunning as Manfred von Carstein. There is no stratagem he will not employ, from unceremonially dragging down the foe beneath hordes of zombies to using their very souls to power his fell magic. So I'm sure to help other people, like, save a world that was, etc. So going on to his rules. So he's going to cost you 380 points, so he is more expensive than Neferata. And we'll find out if we think he is worth those extra points. And obviously it's the same as Neferata in terms of leader, behemoth, and of course unique. So going on to his War Scroll, the description. Manfred von Carstein is a named character. There's a single model. He is armed with Geistvar and Sickle Glaive. I think that's how it's pronounced, God knows. And then it also says if he's Legion of the Night, counts the general as the other guy, so that's fantastic. And then Mount, Dread Abyssal, and then Companion, Ghosts, and then he can fly. Fantastic. Same as Neferata. His wall stats are the same, so this is a movement of 16 to start with, Saver 3+, Bravery 10, 12 runes. Fantastic. It got the same upgrades Neferata did. I've already gone over why I really like that. Same reason for Manfred, one of my favourite models, of course, and characters. And I actually have all the Mortarchs built separately, because I know you can magnetize them, but if you're a true Death fan, you build them separately, in my opinion. Then going on to its melee weapon. So first one, which is Geistvar. So this is a 1-inch range, 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1 rend, D3 damage, swinging on the D3 damage, but an alright attack, basically like a normal Vampire Lord's sword, the Spirit Possessed Sword, or whatever the Vampire Blade's called. And then going on to the Sickle Glaive. So this is a 2-inch range, 2 attacks, freeze to hit, freeze to wound, -1 rend, 2 damage. So that is nicer, but only 2 attacks again. And then the Ebon Claws. So this is a 6 attacks, force to hit, freeze to wound, -2 rend, 2 damage. And the Spectral Claws and Daggers, 6 attacks, 5s and 4s, no rend and 1 damage, and a range of 1. So the same as Neferata there. Of course, do mortal wounds on those 6s to hit. Then going on to his abilities though, because as we can see, there's quite a few that's going to separate what he does to Neferata. So firstly, you've got the Hunger, just the generic one, which means that he will heal D3 if you eat something. Then going on to the next thing, which is the Armour of Temperhof. So the first wound or mortal wound allocated to this model in each phase is negated. So that is really quite big, because let's say the enemy chucks a spell, you shoots you, and also does some damage to you in the combat phase, and also this could be damage to you in the charge phase and movement phase. There's lots of stuff that can be done. But let's just say hero, shooting, and combat, the 3 most likely ones. That's 3 wounds already, you've been saved. So very nice that is once per phase and not in just generally a turn or even a battle round. So good there, makes him more survivable. Then we have the Sword of Unholy Power. So if an enemy model are slain by wounds inflicted by this model's Geistvor until the end of that phase. Add 1 to the attack characteristics of melee weapons used by friendly Soulblight Gravelords summonable units while they are wholly within 12 inches of this model. So the word in there basically means not when he did the ability, everything that was wholly within 12 inches of him gets it. It's when they make their attacks. And this means that when you attack with this model, don't just attack with Geistvor, however it is pronounced. I think I just said the same thing again. But attack with that maybe last. If it's, let's say, a enemy with, I don't know, it's got 12 wounds or something, and you go, if I'm going to kill this guy, it's going to take everything. Attack with Geistvor last, so you get to do the kill and blow with that. It is important. Obviously, Soulblight Gravelord summonable units are very good in generally Soulblight Gravelord Army, but in particularly Legion of Night with Graveguard, Death Rattle, anything in that sort of skeletal arena is going to benefit from this massively. But obviously zombies, getting that extra attack, doing more mortal wounds is very good. Just basically every summonable unit will benefit from this, obviously, but some, play into your tactics more than others. The next thing we have is the Mortarch of Night. So at the start of the combat phase, if this model is within 3 inches of an enemy unit, you can remove this model from the battlefield and set it up again anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units, which is a fantastic ability, and even more so for Mannfred, because he's very much of running away and coming back to strike later, like Starscream, whatever it was from Transformers. Very much the same sort of principles. And what it means is that he's very good actually to be used as a screen, because it means the enemy charges him and then he can teleport away. But obviously, if the enemy charges him with something that they do damage to him in the charge phase, it's still going to affect him because he teleports at the start of the combat phase, etc. But he can be very useful there. It makes him so much more survivable. It is absolutely amazing and will infuriate your opponent to God's belief. It's really, really good. And then he's got Frightful Touch, which again we've already been through. And then going on to magic, and cast 2 spells and bind 2 spells, etc. His spell he's got on his War Scrolls, Wind of Death. Wind of Death has cast phase 7. If successfully cast, pick one enemy unit within 18 inches of the caster that is invisible to them and roll a dice for that unit. And each other enemy unit within 6 inches of that enemy unit on a 3+, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. So very good. That's a wide area that you could do mortal wounds to the enemy unit, because it's not wholly within, it's just within. So that is a very nice spell there, especially like when you just go, I might do an Arcane Bolt, don't really know what else to do. Just do this. It's so much better for sure. Cast phase 7, which, yeah, it's a bit higher, but, it's not too bad. Unfortunately, Mannfred used to have ways to pluses to his casting and stuff, which he can't do anymore. He used to tween it with like the Sword and Holy Power and stuff, but it doesn't work anymore. But cast phase 7, it's the average at the end of the day. But he has, of course, got access to the Law of the Vampires and Law of the Necromancers, and obviously pick one spell. It's not, he can do whatever one any time of the day. He can pick one spell, so he's also got spells to be cast in anyway, but not a bad spell, that Wind of Death. And then going on to his next thing, which is command ability, which I've mentioned so many times in this video, and that is going to be the Vigor of Undeath. So you can use his command ability once per turn in your hero phase. If you do so, add 1 to the hit and wound rolls for friendly Soulblight Gravelord units wholly within 12 inches of this model until your next hero phase. Now this is amazing. I don't think I really need to explain why it is, because I think I basically haven't really talked about any other unit in this entire review, and not just this video, but in the other videos for this army, about chucking in the mention of Vigor and Death of Mannfred's command ability, going, its War Scroll's good, but +1 to hit and wound, it's really good. And the reason why I keep bringing it up is because the enemy can't stop it with Raw, because this is used in the hero phase and it's just an aura ability. So as long as you've got a command point, which you should do, you're always going to get this off as long as you've got everything within range, which is wholly within 12 inches. This guy has a fairly large base. It's not that hard to do. So yeah, absolutely fantastic command ability. Use it every time. And I take Mannfred in a lot of my lists just to use this command ability, because for 380 points, to be honest with you, he's worth it, and he brings a load of other things to the table as well. So that is Mannfred von Carstein, and that is going to leave us with the keywords, which is Death, Vampire, Soulblight Gravelords, Deathlords, Legion of Night, Monster, Hero, Wizard, and Mortarch Mannfred. So what I would say there is that is going to be the last unit we review in this video, and this video has come up to 2 hours and 10 minutes, so you can imagine this video is a colossal video and it's taken absolutely ages to do. for sure. And what I would say is that the only 3 war scrolls we have left to review for the Soulblight Gravelords are the 2 monsters, which is just going to be a Terrorgeist and a Zombie Dragon. Fairly simple. And then also Nagash himself. And I really think he deserves at least his own video, or maybe combined with the monsters, we'll see. But obviously, Age Nagash, he deserves all the time and attention. And I don't really know when I'll get those videos out. But what I will say is basically, by the time you guys are watching this video, I've got, for my own work in real life, unfortunately, I've got loads of courses at the moment. So basically, while recording this video, it's been in and out of doing loads of revision. So recording this video has given me kind of a break from revision, which has been nice, but it means this video is taking a long time to record. It means that when this video comes out, I won't even be at home because I have to go away for these courses and stuff as well. So won't be any sort of videos for a little while. And I know the videos haven't been huge amount at the moment, but it'll be less. So I wanted to get this one out a little bit while I've already started the courses and stuff. So hopefully it won't be too long, you know, basically a month until I make some more videos for you. So I don't really want there to be like a gap of a whole month. I want there to be a little bit less. So that's why I've stretched this video out essentially. But if you do like Soulblight Gravelords, hopefully the fact that this video has gone on for now 2 hours and 10 minutes will demonstrate to you that it really is a long video rather than just being like 5-10 minute videos, or 5 obviously much longer videos. But anyway, I ramble on. With that, guys, I really hope you enjoy this video. Let me know if you got experience, any questions with the Soulblight Gravelords themselves, and in particular, obviously, the Soulblight Vampire Heroes, which we discussed in this video, or the units, I suppose, because we did the units as well. And what I'd say as well is, obviously, as always, guys, the usual spiel. If you would like to support the channel, I've got a Patreon or a YouTube membership, which you can click the join button to become a YouTube member, or you can click the link down to my Patreon down below. It makes a huge difference. $1 a month, £1 a month, honestly keeps the channel going. Massively gives me justification to be able to record videos like this when I'm meant to be revising for my courses and my exams. So think about that. And then if you can't support that way, that's absolutely fine. All I ask, if you do enjoy the video, please like, subscribe, and smash the bell button. If you haven't pressed any of those 3 buttons yet, and just double check because YouTube likes to unpress them for some reason. Massively helps out the channel. It's absolutely free. So if you do enjoy the stuff, I don't know why you wouldn't do that. It massively helps me out, and it, like I say, it doesn't cost you a penny. And then also, if you think you know someone who enjoyed the video, make sure you share with them, of course. And if you'd like to become part of the amazing Age Nagash Discord, where we've got something about 350 members, there's a link to that in the description down below. Honestly, such a nice community. I've talked about it a lot in the last video I did on the Hangout. I was joined by members of my Discord, and they're absolutely lovely people. So if you want to join the community, you're more than welcome. Go ahead. And the last thing I just want to say is a massive shout out to all my patrons and YouTube members who do massively support me and keep the channel going. And that is going to be my Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, who is going to be Filq. So Filq, thank you so much. And that massive tier, he's the biggest supporter I have, and it really goes a long way to help me keep going at this. So thank you so much. And then my Morgasts, who also give a huge amount of support to the channel, is going to be Bleed Red, the Mortarch of The Necropolis, and Edward P, and Gullswept Dandy. Guys, thank you all so much for being so generous in your help and support and giving the channel going, especially where it's been quite difficult quite lately. And then what I always say is going to be the core that massively helps me out are going to be my vampires. And this is going to be Ben C, Rouse321, David A, Dragoonity, Ronni H, Darren L, SpareBear, Christopher H, Northdrop, Nathan F, Andrew G, Tom W, Wiggy Whooty, and Nathan S. Guys, thank you all so much for your continued support. Again, it's a very generous amount you're giving support to the channel, so thank you so much. And thank you mainly so much for keeping it up over this time. And then my Necromancers, who is Jacq.l, RadiationRiley, AW77, WolfNick, Michal W, Cranky Wombat, Tom M, Christopher C, Christopher F, James S, Thomas B, Steve T, James T, Patrick F, JJ, R Christopher, Sception, Shaun S, Gordon W, and Val. Guys, thank you all so much for allowing me to keep this up. And like I always say, just huge support to the channel, because in real realisticness terms, I haven't been able to produce that much videos lately, and not for the next month when you guys be watching this. Anyway, so the fact that you guys are still supporting me during this harder time is really, really, what's the right word for it? Just really kind and generous of you, and I massively support it. And huge shout out to all of you guys for making me smile when I read your names on times like this. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for that, as I always say. And if anyone would like to become these amazing people, click the join button or the link down to my Patreon. But if you can't do that, smash the like, subscribe, bell notification, absolutely free. But above anything else, guys, I'm just really glad that you came and checked out this video today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Got any questions or any more thoughts, what you think, put it in the comments down below, of course. And remember, until next time, guys, just stay safe, stay hygienic, make sure you wear a mask, and for God's sake, wash your hands. And then, more importantly, though, remember until next time that Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.